Welcome into a Thanksgiving holiday weekend edition of MPW Digital Extra, presented by Rustic Revivals Furniture Co. I'm Neal McCready. Today on the show, we're joined by a quartet of guests. Going to cover the gamut. It's going to be a pretty good show. I think you're going to really enjoy it. First, Ryan Brown of the Next Round joins, preview the weekend ahead in college football. With him, a lot on the line with the Egg Bowl, the Iron Bowl, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, and more. We'll talk about a lot of those things, big picture, some coaching stuff as well. I think you'll enjoy that. Then I want to dive into Ole Miss more specifically in the wake of the Rebels' loss at Florida in advance of the Egg Bowl game on Friday afternoon, 2:30, Vaught Hemingway in Oxford. Talked to Brett Norsworthy, WHBQ 560 in Memphis, part of the Ole Miss radio network as well. We'll talk about what happened with the Rebels in Gainesville, maybe where things go from here, and then just some thoughts about the rivalry itself. Ole Miss, Mississippi State renewing is the word I'm looking for, renewing that rivalry before Friday's game. Then we're going to have a little fun. ESPN sideline reporter and Chicago Cubs broadcaster Taylor McGregor joins. Talk about her career, how she ended up in Chicago, broadcasting with the Cubs, part of that team. And then obviously some of her work as an ESPN sideline reporter. Been all over the SEC, was at Ole Miss, South Carolina earlier this year in Columbia. She'll be in Nashville on Saturday for Tennessee, Vanderbilt. So we talk about her career as well. And then we preview rivalry week in college football with Barstool Sports Ben Mintz. Also look ahead to week 13 in the National Football League. Think you'll enjoy that as always. And as always, MPW Digital Extra is presented by Rustic Revivals Furniture Co. Based out of Flowood, Mississippi, Rustic Revivals builds tables and other furniture by hand with locally sourced lumber. The husband and wife team of Josh and Ashley Pierce specialize in custom-ordered tables, beds, dressers, coffee tables, bookshelves, decorative cabinets, and chairs. They have a limited selection of ready-for-pickup pieces available in their shop. They deliver within 250 miles of Flowood, and podcast listeners can get up to 20% off the purchase by using the code REBELS20 at checkout. The QR code is also in the YouTube stream right here on the screen, so you can go to rusticrevivalsms.com, facebook.com/rusticrevivalsms, or go on Instagram, look at their work at Rustic Revivals. You can also order directly from them, by calling 228-217-1243 or email rusticrevivals@gmail.com. So without further ado, we go to the Campbell Clinic hotline and Ryan Brown of the Next Round. Ryan Brown of the Next Round, kind enough to join us here on this MPW Digital Extra. Ryan, first of all, happy Thanksgiving to you and your family. Hope you have a great one. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, you too, Neal. I hope the family's doing well. Look forward to Thanksgiving. It is a fun day. And by the way, America's team, Miami Dolphins, they play Thanksgiving night against the Packers.
Well, so I'm glad they do, and Ole Miss doesn't. I'll tell you that. So good. Go Dolphins. I'm fine with that. I'm so glad that I'm so happy. In fact, it's funny you say that. This is a true story. My wife, Laura, this morning said, "You're in a good mood." And I was like, yeah, why would I not be in a good mood? And she goes, I don't know. You usually don't like Thanksgiving week. And I was like, really? And she goes, yeah, you hate it. And I'm like, no, I don't. And she goes, yes, you do. You hate Thanksgiving because you always have to go cover a game that night. And I'm like, oh, we've just stumbled on something. I'm in such a good mood because it's a Friday game. I'm like, I'm perfectly cool covering a 2:30 Friday game. I'm great with it. That's awesome. I mean, and when the Egg Bowl was on Saturday, it was fine. But I hated Thursday nights. And then Starkville, and when you didn't get back till 2 a.m. and
oof.
Yeah, and you like, look, I'll admit it, on Thanksgiving Day, my family, I mean, we'll open a couple bottles of wine, we just enjoy ourselves, and you couldn't do that when you had to go cover a game. 4:30, 5 o'clock.
Yeah, I was in the group that loved a Thanksgiving Egg Bowl. But I also knew from you and others I know over there that I did not share the thoughts of most in the state of Mississippi. But I think nationally people loved it, right? Because it was always an entertaining event. Maybe not be a great game, but an entertaining event every Thanksgiving night.
Well, you got the circus, and by then you probably maybe you're thinking about your leftover turkey sandwich. Like, hey, do I have that in the second quarter? Or do I wait till the half? That's a big difference from. Yeah, so of course you enjoyed it. Who knows? Maybe they'd have a fight. maybe somebody would pretend to pee on a fire hydrant. I mean, who knows?
I loved it. Yeah,
right?
you never knew.
Who knows what would happen when the circus came to town?
Well, one of the guys we love having on our show, we built a good relationship with John Summerall, the Tulane head coach. When he was at Troy, he used to come on with us occasionally, and he was just such a good interview. And they play Thanksgiving night against Memphis, and I asked him point blank, I was like, "Would you like to try to own Thanksgiving night as a college team?" And he basically said, "I'll play anytime, anywhere, any play, any team, whatever. But let me do it once and just see how it goes." So it'll be interesting to see, what that is like moving forward, because Texas A&M, when you and I were growing up, that was the Thanksgiving night game. And now that they're back, I don't think they have any desire to play that on Thanksgiving night. So, and I'm not sure I don't think you'll ever see an SEC game on Thanksgiving night again, honestly.
I don't either. Nobody wants to go up against the NFL. I mean, the NFL flexes its muscles and you lose. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter how big you are. I mean, you could put the Iron Bowl up against an NFL primetime game and it would lose. It's just the NFL is such a monster.
Yeah. And if it was the Amazon Thursday night game, you would be closer. I still don't know that you beat it, because those Amazon games get 10, 11 million people, which is a really big college audience. But the NBC game, I mean, forget that. I mean, if they're going to put it on NBC, Dolphins, Green Bay, or whoever it is, you're not going to beat that with a college game. So you're just beating your head against the wall. And when they moved the Egg Bowl off Thanksgiving night, I think that showed you the SEC has finished playing Thanksgiving night games.
I agree. They said, "Hey, we'll play 2 on Friday."
Yeah, we'll do all that you want. I'll play Black Friday as much as you want. Yeah, but we're not playing Thanksgiving night against the NFL, because there again, the Black Friday game's against the Amazon game. You got a shot at that. You got a shot at beating that.
Yeah, you got people on Friday that they might not want to fool with the whole login to Amazon thing.
Yeah,
that are. But man, if you're on mainstream or DirecTV or whatever, you have no shot.
It's over.
It's like the NBA. The NBA has to be like looking or. Someone in the building at the NBA offices has to go, who pissed off the NFL? Because it's on a Wednesday this year, and the NFL's like, yeah, you know what we're going to do? We're going to stream a couple of games.
We're going to put it on Netflix.
Hell of it. And the NBA's like, my God, can someone send a gift basket over there and make them stop?
That used to be our day. It was Santa and then us. And now they're going to
yeah. They were like, we're not going to touch any other day. We don't play any games on Thanksgiving. We're going to. We surrender, and the NFL's like, "No, we're going to take it."
No, you don't.
All right, so I don't even know where to start with this. I mean, we're taping this. All right, full disclosure, we're taping this on Tuesday. It's 2:45 in the afternoon. Basically, the award, not the award show, the stupid selection.
Yeah,
it shows a few hours away.
Less important in my state and your state than it once was.
There's no doubt. I think Alabama's going to be 12th today. I think Ole Miss is going to be 13th. I think they both have to have help to get in. I said this on my show with Siski that AJ McCarron was on, and AJ even agreed. So I think both Ole Miss and Alabama have big problems. Different problems, but big problems. Ole Miss's problem is Kentucky. That's a problem. They need Kentucky to go replay their schedule and win a few games. And Alabama's got this Saturday night thing that, God, seared people's eyeballs, right? I mean, it was bad. That did not look like a playoff team. That did not look like a team that goes into Norman, Oklahoma and plays 5-5 Oklahoma and loses by 3 touchdowns. Does not look like a team that can compete for the national championship. And so I'm curious with you, how much do you think, and we don't know, so I'm asking, how much do you think the committee is going to look at total resumes for teams like Ole Miss and go, that Kentucky thing is just disqualifying, and for teams like Alabama and go, in the eye test, Alabama failed badly on Saturday night.
So we discussed this on our show today. Like, does the committee, because the human nature is to look at the most recent results, right, and make your judgments off that, which obviously they do. They have to do that because, if you lose, if you're number 5 and you lose, you're going to fall. So that's a recent result bias. Mm-hmm. But in terms of your worst loss, does it matter if it was recent, or does it matter if in Ole Miss's case it was late September, right? I mean,
I don't know.
I would personally say you're looking for the 12 best teams. So now Ole Miss just lost to Florida too. I can't ignore that. But if you're looking for the 12 best teams and I'm comparing losses, I would say, well, if the worst loss was last week versus early September, I'm going to give at least 1 point to the team that had the loss in September, right?
Yeah.
Neither one of them have a good argument. Ole Miss nor Alabama has a good argument. if they played in a neutral, and look, if they played in Oxford, Ole Miss would win the game. Alabama, outside of Baton Rouge, is an awful road team.
Yeah.
Well, outside of Baton Rouge and Madison, Wisconsin. Madison, Wisconsin was 3 months ago, though, so I don't know how much that matters.
I was in Winston-Salem that day, coming Ole Miss wake and watching Alabama just spank Wisconsin. Just the only thought through my mind that day was, I don't know what Wisconsin is, but if they're good, Alabama's a rolling ball of butcher knives.
Yeah, I mean, and Wisconsin turned out not to be very good, and they lost their quarterback in that game too. But Alabama performed very well. They were clean on offense, played really good defense. But, Alabama at Vandy was a disaster. Alabama at Tennessee was a complete mess. Alabama at Oklahoma was beyond either one of those. So away from Bryant-Denny, it has not been consistently a good team. Even in Bryant-Denny, they've had some struggles. Now, you look back at that South Carolina game, I think a little bit differently now because you've seen what South Carolina has become. That's a good football team.
Yes.
And Alabama let them back in that game. That game is about to be 14-0 at the half, and it's over. And Alabama let them back in it by making mistakes. And to South Carolina's credit, they capitalized on the mistakes. So I say all that to say, if Bama and Ole Miss played in Oxford, I firmly believe Ole Miss wins that game, maybe even easily. If Bama and Ole Miss play in Bryant-Denny, I probably like Alabama there. If they play on a neutral site, I really have no earthly idea. So, who's the better team? I don't know.
It's the baffling part of Ole Miss. Ole Miss went to Columbia, South Carolina, and destroyed them. It was never.
They did.
It was never a game. I mean, I was right there. It was never a game. It was a complete mauling of South Carolina. They could do nothing. They completely shut out Lenore Sellers. He was frustrated. He looked like a freshman, and they sandwiched that with the Kentucky game and then LSU. And then when you think they're done, they beat Georgia by 18 points. They beat Arkansas by 32 points. They had a dominant second half against Oklahoma, and you're like, oh, they're back. Here they go. And then they lose to Florida. And you're like, what? But even with all of that, if you just change the Kentucky game, they're in today. They beat they go 10-2, and they're in the playoff.
Yeah. And, you can say the same of Alabama. If you just change the Tennessee game, even as bad, and it's wild that I have to change the Tennessee game, not the Vandy game, but that's the one Alabama was closer to winning was Tennessee. They actually led the Tennessee game. They never led against Vandy. So it's hard to say, if you change a play here or play there, they beat Vandy. I don't know if they do. But even with that stinker of a performance, that'd be a wild, I still think Alabama's in because they would have been in Atlanta. But that's kind of a wild exercise. Like if Bama's 2 losses were at Vanderbilt and at Oklahoma, and that's their only 2 losses, and they've got wins over Georgia, a win over Tennessee, I guess they're in, right? They're a 2-loss SEC team in Atlanta. They're in.
Yes.
Yeah, and those are awful losses, terrible losses.
Yeah, no.
But if that's their 2 losses, they're in.
100%. 100%. I mean, if Ole Miss had beaten LSU and they had losses to Florida and Kentucky, they would absolutely be in today.
Yep.
That's the wildest part of it.
I know. So I think it becomes like for Bama and Ole Miss, let's assume they're 12-13. And I agree with you. I think that's about where both of them will be. I don't know what order, but let's assume they're 12-13. I think it's a given a Tennessee loss to Vandy probably puts whoever is 12, assuming Ole Miss wins the Egg Bowl, Bama wins the Iron Bowl, which for Ole Miss, safe assumption. For Alabama, not a safe assumption right now.
Yeah.
If they win both those games and Tennessee loses to Vandy, I think the 12 team probably jumps Tennessee. And that's going to be weird now with Tennessee having beaten Alabama, but I just think that's the way it'll go because they showed last week they do not like Tennessee's resume. And if you add a loss to Vandy to that, it doesn't help that resume any.
What if South Carolina beats Clemson?
See, and that's the crazy thing because now they're all 3 losses, right? And South Carolina certainly is the team that looks like they're playing the best of those 3.
And I got to see where they don't have a shitty loss. Pardon my language.
No.
They lost to Alabama in a close game. They lost to Ole Miss. It wasn't close, and it was at home, so that hurts them a little bit. And then they lost that LSU game where, frankly, anybody who watches it knows that they got screwed.
They did, and here's where the committee would have a test. That LSU game, they played without Sellers for the second half. That was Robbie Ashford in the second half. So you wonder, now Sellers, if you look at that realistically, he was still young. He was early. I don't know that it was a massive downgrade to go to Robbie Ashford. LSU couldn't stop him because they can't stop a running quarterback to save their life. But, they did have to do that. I think the question becomes, like, if USC is the upset over Notre Dame, and now it's a 2-loss Notre Dame team, would any one of those 3 we just mentioned jump Notre Dame? I think that becomes the discussion. I think Tennessee is vulnerable. How vulnerable is Notre Dame, do you think?
Very.
So even a 2-loss, you think one of those 3-loss SEC teams, because that Northern Illinois loss is worse than anything we've discussed yet. I mean, there's not one we've discussed that approaches that loss.
Here's what I believe. And you know me, I'm a pretty pragmatic person. And when it comes to business, sometimes I look at it and like, you guys know what's going to happen. Yeah. I mean, we can do these fun little shows on tonight, Tuesday night, whatever, last week. It's made for TV and everybody talks about it. And it does its job. I mean, ESPN gets lots of ratings for it. And then you guys talk about it all morning. And we talk about it and everybody talks about it. But now there's going to come a point next Saturday night, next Sunday, when it's all done and the TV people are in the room and Greg Sankey's basically in the room and the Big Ten's in the room where they go, y'all want us to do this again next year? You're going to take care of us. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Where ESPN goes, hey, we got a lot invested in the SEC. I mean, a lot. Mm-hmm. Yep. And where Fox goes, yeah, we got a lot kind of invested in the Big Ten too, you know, and Notre Dame's got an open invitation to both leagues.
That's right. You can join anytime.
And yep. It's an opportunity to send a message. Hey, you guys don't like it? Pick one.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I still think somehow, some way, the Big Ten gets 4 and the SEC gets 4. And if Notre Dame stumbles, one of them's getting 5, and it's probably the SEC.
It's crazy to think about.
And here's like the eye test thing, right? I don't know how much of it you got to watch on Saturday. And I'm rambling. I apologize.
Which game?
Indiana.
Oh, I watched all of it. Yeah.
They're horrible.
I mean, I think they've got a good story, but I don't. I mean, but again, let's play that exercise.
Not a good story. I mean, Clark's a great story. I mean, they yeah. You know, they beat Alabama. Why not Vanderbilt? I mean, right. I'm telling you. You put Indiana on a neutral site against all 16 SEC teams. They beat Mississippi State.
They definitely beat State.
They beat Kentucky.
Probably. I mean, you're going to get Auburn pretty quick, and I'm telling you. And I know it sounds crazy, but this Auburn team. I do too. This Auburn team, when they don't turn the ball over, it's not a bad football team. Their losses have come from turnovers, and they've quit turning it over, which is why they got a shot against Alabama.
Yeah, they lose to Florida.
Yeah.
They definitely lose to Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas.
Yeah, once you get to the top of the league, it's over.
But I mean, even like if you told me Arkansas limited their turnovers to 2 or fewer, I think I'd pick Arkansas.
Yeah, and they benefit from being in the Big Ten. To your point, I mean, you look at the Big Ten. There's a clear line of demarcation. You've got Oregon, Ohio State, Indiana, Penn State, and then it falls off after that. But you know what? That's great for Indiana because, as you just said, they're going to get 4 teams in this playoff, and all you got to be is in the top 4. Well, that's Penn State, Indiana, Ohio State, and Oregon. So it's over. It just depends on which one gets the bye and which one has to hit the road at some point, probably. But and that's what I always said, Neal, about like you had fans in this state that are Alabama fans when it looked like Alabama was walking to the SEC championship game before that trip to Norman. They're like, I don't know if I really want to go.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I kept telling them, and I saw Kiffin. I think it was your question. I'm not sure, but I think it was. We played it on our show when he was talking about all the coaches are talking to him about not wanting to go to Atlanta.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, you can't think that the Big Ten and the SEC would have built the bomb that would blow them up. They don't build this system and then not build in the fail-safe of, oh, by the way, our biggest property, our football championship game, we're not going to have that diminish because of this, right? Because we make a lot of money off that. It's part of our TV deal. We sell tickets. We got sponsorships of it. We do all this stuff around it. It's a big moneymaker. We cannot diminish that. I mean, it may not be written in the fine print, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, Neal. They're not going to build a bomb that blows themselves up.
I mean, but Texas A&M beats.
It's tricky there.
And they've already got 3 losses, and they go play Georgia.
Yeah, it's tricky.
And they beat Georgia. So Georgia would have 3 losses. A&M gets the automatic bid as the damn 2 seed.
I know. Ridiculous.
And then, so what happens to Georgia with 3 losses?
I mean, I think they're still in. I just maintain a team. A&M's the trickier case because if they lose to Georgia, they got 4 losses. But I have been assured that SEC number 2 is not getting left out of this thing, that the SEC is going to protect. I mean, like I
loss,
could see.
A&M gets in.
I know.
I know.
But I could see them throwing a team to the Wolves to get their number 2. They're not going to allow that game to be diminished. I mean, the last thing they want is Lane Kiffin standing behind a microphone wondering if it's good to go to Atlanta. I mean, I'm sure when Sankey saw that, he was like, what are you doing, Lane?
But he knew he was right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody wants to be the guinea pig, right? I think
most
Lane
was saying. Lane didn't say I don't want to go.
No, I know.
He said if you offer me 2 choices and one is I don't have to go and I'm guaranteed a spot, or I have to go and don't have that guarantee. Well, duh.
Yeah,
that's
exactly
what he said, and he's right.
Yeah. I just don't think anybody wants to be the guinea pig. Like Alabama fans did not want to be the potential 3-loss team that we have to test that theory with, right? Now, Texas is a totally different situation. Like if Texas beats A&M and they go and it's their second loss, I don't think you sweat it. Like I think Texas, without Bama and Ole Miss losing, Texas was going to be in trouble if they were a 2-loss non-Atlanta team, right? If they lost to A&M, knocked them out of Atlanta, and it was Bama, Georgia, Bama, A&M, whoever. But they're fine now, I think. But I think they were the weakest resume of everyone.
Does Kalen DeBoer really miss Seattle these days? I mean, is he like thinking, you know what? I know there was a lot of unrest and a lot of homeless and things got a little weird, but it wasn't so bad.
I mean, he could have had the season he just had in Tuscaloosa, and I think people would still be applauding him at Washington. Like, oh, we just played for the national championship last year, and look at this, we followed it up maybe with a 9-win season.
Yeah,
I mean that's a win in Seattle. You know this, you've lived in this state, and I don't think people have to live in this state to know, but you've lived in it, so you know it. That is a demanding fan base. I mean, you call Alabama fans what you want. You can call them, idiots, crazy, but
demanding is a very diplomatic, fair assessment that is completely right of that fan base.
But whatever adjective you put on them, they are passionate football fans, right? Nobody's going to argue that. Passionate football fans. Mm-hmm. It is 24/7 in this state. Even as insane as it sounds, like even before Saban got there was no such thing as an acceptable loss. Like even through the Shula years when they sucked, I mean, nobody ever was like, "Yeah, we should have lost that game." Like it was the end of the world with every loss. And then Saban got there and they never lost, and that only amped that up, right? I mean, that turned it up to 11. So whoever came in there, it could have been Belichick or DeBoer or anybody else. The expectation was you don't lose a football game. I mean, that was it. And if I had told Alabama fans, assume they lose Saturday, and I told Alabama fans 8-4 with a loss to Auburn, I would have gotten laughed out of this state. And there's not an Alabama fan alive that dreamt that was a possibility. 9-3 with a win over Auburn out of the playoff was bad enough, but 8-4 with a loss to Auburn would be a disaster.
How possible is a loss to Auburn on Saturday in Tuscaloosa?
I mean, yeah, it is just so hard to know. Like, I think this Auburn team is playing with a great deal of confidence, as much confidence as they could play with. I mean, they played with no confidence all season long, right? And rightfully so, because they were just, I mean, they cut the wrong wire every single time.
Not easy to beat ULM, and when you do it, sometimes it really puffs you up,
That's right. And they did, and it was the best their offense had looked in a long time, and then they follow it up. This is what's wild. Like, the way Auburn fans, I think some of them talked themselves into, they got a shot at Bryant-Denny. You know what that's all based on? The fact that they got a 2-point conversion and the 2-point conversion off that overtime is now. Like, if they don't get that 2-point conversion and Texas A&M finds a way to win in overtime, Auburn fans would not be focusing on the field rush and how loud the crowd was and how Auburn got a win over a top 15 team. It would be about, my God, this team, we've built all these leads and we've blown all these leads, and Hugh Freeze. I mean, it's just amazing that one play changed all that. And now you got one fan base that's probably at the height they've been all year in this state, and one fan base that's at the lowest point they've been all year. So, and this Alabama team's been impossible to figure out. I know I said they've played better at home, but they've still put up some stinkers at home. South Florida for 3 quarters was awful. South Carolina for a lot of that game was not good. Georgia for the first half is the best team I've seen in America this year. So they're Missouri was banged up. They didn't have Cook. So they were playing lock, and it was never a contest. But Alabama looked good in that situation. So they've looked really good at home. They've looked really bad at home at times. Auburn has, when they haven't gotten in their own way, they've played pretty solid football. But I just don't know how it. If this game were in Jordan-Hare, I think Auburn would win it. And Bryant-Denny, I just don't know.
I mean, obviously for Hugh, it would be a massive win.
Huge.
He almost got it last year. I mean, that a sliver of a end zone away from winning that game. Let's assume, for the sake of the argument, that he doesn't get it. How hot's the seat going into next year? I know they put a lot of stock in this recruiting class that's coming in, but it's my understanding that Hugh rubbed a few people the wrong way when he was like, "Hey, let's save some of this NIL money for next season. Let's be careful with what we do." And that's, as I tell people all the time, and you know this, perception and reality are often two different things, except locally, wherever local is, perception is reality. And Auburn's local perception is that they should be a national contender every single year. It's never a rebuild. And even though from the outside looking in, you go, that's insane. It doesn't really matter, because the decisions are made locally, and locally that is the perception.
Well, and I do think, and you lived it, you saw it, I think there's a perception, and it's not an incorrect perception, that they've got a passionate fan base too. Like, I mean, they packed that again. I mean, that was not even a bowl eligible team, Auburn, and they packed that place out, and it was a tough place for A&M to play. And I think they look at that and like, we do our part. I mean, Neal, you lived through the Tupperware era there. I mean, that place is really hard to play in for an opponent.
Oh, yeah. I've covered games there where it was an absolute home field advantage, period. Where it was as intimidating and loud as any place. And I'll give them this. Their fans especially at night, but even late afternoon, if you give them a reason to think that Auburn has a chance to win, they will stay loud. I call them a cult, and I realize that's picking on them. I get it. I get why they don't like it. But cults can be a problem. Like A&M gets loud because everybody's coordinated. They're not worried about being cool. Yeah.
I don't understand
that way. Everybody does Bodegetta, and everybody does all the stuff, and it's very coordinated, and it's impressive when they get it going. And I've watched them beat superior teams in that building.
Yeah. Oh, no, there's no doubt. I've been to Iron Bowl after Iron Bowl where Alabama's 2 touchdowns better than them. And Alabama does not handle I've seen Georgia too, when they're a much better team, and they just don't handle the crowd. Like the crowd, you can tell it's got, their false starts, bad communication, delays of game, all those things.
Sure.
I think with Freeze, here's the issue. And to your point, here's where fans got frustrated with him in the offseason. Auburn had Peyton Thorne as quarterback last year. And it did not go well. And he chose to stick with him and very publicly back him, when I think a lot of the donors gave to the NIL thinking that Hugh would go use that to get a quarterback. Now, was Auburn in the running for Cam Ward, which would have been a game changer? Obviously, he's got Miami with a chance to get in the college football playoff. Absolutely. Yeah, that changes everything for Auburn. Yeah. Now, were they ever in the running? I don't know. I don't know what Cam Ward got at Miami. But this is the way an NIL guy thinks. Like, well, I gave my money. Why couldn't we use that for Cam Ward?
Sure.
There was some talk about Grayson McCall. Now, I will point out Grayson McCall was a bust at NC State. That did not work out before his injury there. So I think a lot of people wanted Grayson McCall. You can miss in the portal too. Like, I mean, the whole reason Indiana is where they are is they got a Mac kid. They got Rourke out of the portal. If I'd have sold Auburn fans on that, they'd have been like, "You kidding me? That's who we're going to battle with." But would he be better than Peyton Thorne? I don't know. So Hugh Freeze stuck with Peyton Thorne and very publicly backed Peyton Thorne and said, "Peyton's our guy. I believe in Peyton. He's finishing my sentences for me and all that." And then, 2 weeks into the season, he's, stop me if you've heard this before. He's rolling Peyton Thorne under the bus. And then Peyton, we had an NIL deal with Peyton on our show. This was amazing, really. So like week after week, Freeze is rolling him under the bus in the post game. Then Peyton's coming on our show and basically telling a different story. And then Freeze is having to go on the teleconference, and all the Auburn writers are like, "Well, Peyton Thorne said this." And then Freeze is having to to back it up, Terry. Put it in reverse, Terry. And I mean, it was a mess, right? And so that was that. So
Hey,
if I'm
we got Bo Wallace on a post game show, and that took off.
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. So that was a lot of the year. That has settled down a lot as Auburn has started to play a little bit better, and Freeze has had to quit rolling Thorne under the bus. But I mean, that's just been the wild dynamic, and the NIL people look at that and they're like, why are we not better at quarterback? So to answer your question, how hot is the seat for Freeze next year? How good is the quarterback? Because he's got parts there. Cam Coleman has been fantastic the last couple of weeks. Yeah, really good receiver. And he did. I'll give him credit. He went and got Keandre Lambert-Smith, the receiver from Penn State, through the portal, and that's been really overall their best receiver. Cam Coleman's been better the last couple of weeks, but KLS has been their best receiver. How hot is the seat is directly proportional to how good is the quarterback, and that's where the problem comes. So they tried Hank Brown for a game. He comes in, he plays well in one of the directional school games, and everybody falls in love with Hank Brown. One half of SEC football, and they're like, "Holy crap, let's get back to Peyton Thorne."
Yeah, against a subpar to average SEC team.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
and so they go back to Thorne, and then he's finished out the rest of the year. So everybody's like, "Where's Walker White? Where's Hank Brown?" These are all guys that are on Auburn's depth chart, and I'm like, if you hadn't seen them this year, I don't I don't know what their prospect is for playing. I mean, there were times this year where they would have taken anybody. So Deuce Knight is the guy everybody's hanging their hopes on around here. Is that Deuce Knight?
He's a talented player. I've seen him. He's got all the tools, big physical kid. That kid is not going to be ready to play SEC football.
So he's not a day one guy in your opinion?
Absolutely not.
So you either gamble that he's a day one guy, or then you hit the portal and go and you convince Deuce Knight's family. And here's the tricky part, right? You can convince Deuce Knight's family, this is only a 1 year deal. We're gonna ease Deuce into this, right? But we need to win right now with this roster. So we're gonna go to the portal and we're gonna get a guy that's gonna play this year. Deuce will be our backup. He'll come in, he'll mop up. We may even have some Deuce Knight packages, right? But that's I think the game that Hugh Freeze is gonna have to play in the offseason, because I just don't believe that Auburn's long-term starter is on that roster right now.
It's just so unlike Hugh to throw a player under a bus. I was shocked when it happened. I was like,
somebody told me, somebody in your state, will remain nameless, told me it was like the day he was hired. It's like, just wait to the first press conference where he throws a player under the bus or a coach under the bus, and it did not take long. It didn't take long at all.
Well, I don't know if you know this. It's never his fault. I mean, never.
That has been pointed out by a lot of people, but he's not getting a free pass. And he did, let me say this, to get the job from Liberty, and Hugh knew that this was a second chance in life, right? I mean, he was never guaranteed another SEC coaching job. In fact, for a while, it looked like he was not going to be allowed another SEC coaching job. So he knew that, and in turn, he did a very Auburn-friendly buyout. It's not super expensive in comparison to buyouts Auburn has already paid or buyouts that you see around the country, and it is structured in a way that Auburn doesn't have to take a huge hit up front. They can spread it out. So in the event it does go bad in year 3, Auburn can very affordably buy Hugh Freeze out. So they're unless something gets adjusted, and I don't think a 6-6 win over Alabama and a berth in a bowl game will get an adjusted contract. I'd be surprised at that. That is a very Auburn friendly buyout, which is odd for Auburn. They've generally been bitten the last 2 times by non-Auburn friendly buyouts.
All right, so last couple minutes here. I'm curious, do you say, let's say Ole Miss beats Mississippi State on Friday.
Okay.
On Saturday, what's their realistic path in terms of upsets? They're all going to be cheering for Auburn. They're going to be cheering for Vanderbilt. They're going to be cheering for Purdue. They're going to be cheering for Southern Cal. I mean, they're going to be hoping for just as much carnage as is humanly possible. What's a realistic path?
The interesting thing there, well, I think it wouldn't hurt. I think it wouldn't hurt to go ahead and get A&M out of the way. Go ahead and get Texas to win.
Yeah.
So A&M would be completely out of the way at that point. So you may as well go ahead and pull for that one. That's not that crazy. Texas is the favorite, though. I think that's a fascinating game in College Station. I would say if you're going to pull for Purdue, I would probably start with going Georgia Tech before I go Purdue. Yeah. I mean, Brent Key has had Georgia Tech playing pretty good football. You hope that maybe Georgia's looking ahead to a conference championship game. They were a little flat against UMass. Maybe they come out flat again. Beck has had a propensity to turn it over, though not in Athens, primarily on the road, as Georgia fans or as Ole Miss fans saw. Georgia fans saw it too. So if you got a Georgia Tech loss, now you got a head-to-head with them, so that benefits you. You may as well go ahead and pull for Auburn in the Iron Bowl, pull for USC against Notre Dame, pull for Texas against Texas A&M. That's and pull for Vandy against Tennessee. I mean, my gosh, if all those happen, Alabama. Well, assuming Alabama even wins the Iron Bowl, Alabama and Ole Miss might both be in at that point. I mean, they both got a head-to-head against Georgia. And I would think, in the event Georgia Tech beats Georgia, the problem there is that's going to test my old you're in Atlanta, you're safe proposition here, right?
Yeah.
So, it's going to be a tough one there.
The Vanderbilt one is kind of interesting because they've played everybody pretty tight. They're better at home than they are on the road. Tennessee is elite defensively. And offensively, against teams with the pulse, they struggle a little. I mean, Nico's still coming along. To your point, right, about you pour a bunch of money into one of these young quarterbacks, and you're like, go. And it takes him a couple of years. Like, I think Nico's going to be a really good player next season. But this has been a roller coaster, as you would expect for a young quarterback. The league hasn't changed. Everybody goes, well, you give him $8 million, go play. You don't take the money out on the field with you. So Vanderbilt's kind of interesting to me. I'm with you, man. I'll be honest. I'll be surprised if Texas A&M doesn't win. They've had that thing circled for so long. That place is going to be just absurd.
Yeah. And how healthy is Quinn Ewers? I mean, the guy had an MRI. So, I mean, it wasn't just, he turned his ankle a little bit. I mean, when you have an MRI, you've probably got some pain there. So how healthy is he? I can't imagine how difficult that place will be to play. Just all the bad blood there. I don't know. That is such a fascinating game. And Texas just has not played anybody, Neal. I mean, my co-host Jim Dunaway pointed this out this week, and I did not know this. They are the 16th team now. They have become team number 16 to play a conference road night game. Everybody else has done it. Or the other 15 had done it. And now Texas,
intentional or not, but they got protected this season with their schedule.
Well, Oklahoma fans were quick to point that out, but there for a little bit, I thought it was actually going to be their undoing. I mean, again, I'll say if it didn't take a spate of crazy upsets Saturday with Ole Miss losing at Florida and Bama losing at Oklahoma, a 2-loss Texas team was going to have some trouble with that schedule because their best win was going to be Vanderbilt. And I just don't know that was going to be enough to get you in. So you're right. There's no doubt they got a better schedule than Oklahoma did if you just want to look at the two coming in. And they didn't have to play a conference road night game. That's crazy to me.
That is.
I mean, everybody else has had to do it. And they're the last team to now do it. But, boy, waiting to the very end might bite you again.
All right, last thing. I'm curious. This is year one of this. I assume next year will be just the same. But down the road, this thing gets expanded, right? It goes to 16. Is that where we're headed? 14, 16?
Well, don't you think the next obvious step is for the TV partners, even if you get Fox involved now, if ESPN, they sold off some stuff to Turner, but maybe with even more games, there's a slice of the pie for Fox, that Fox and ESPN are able to go to the Big Ten and the SEC and say, all right, that championship game has been a good run. And I know you make X off of it, but let me show you with an expanded playoff how I can give you Y. You don't even have to play the game now. Yeah. Declare the champion however you want. We don't care how have co-champions. You did that, for 100 years.
This.
I think.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I think that's the next logical step, isn't it? Is that you eliminate the conference championship games. You just basically fold those into a 16-team playoff, and the big conferences make more money. I don't think you'd have to twist the ACC and the Big 12's arm to give up their conference championship game with the prospect of having more spots in the playoffs for their teams to get and not be as much of a one-bid league as they appear to be right now.
It's just been such a convention for the SEC, and they get all their partners and all that stuff, and it's just people are not wired to walk off money like that. But there's probably a way to do it, but man, there's a lot of corporate money tied into that game.
Yeah, you're going to have to. No, it's going to have to be a raise. I mean, you're not leaving that job without a raise, right? So I don't think Sankey or Petiti will agree to it if it's not more money for their conference. And the prospect of not having to actually put the game on. But I'm like you. I mean, Alabama's not in the game. I'll be over there in a couple Saturdays. It is like you said, it's an SEC convention. It's their pride and joy. And for a very long time, it was the top game in America, even bigger than the actual national championship game. Like there were times where that was the national championship game.
Yeah, it's been a dramatic success. That's why I'm you'll have to really talk them out of walking away from it.
No doubt.
It's been a boon for the league. It's been great. Yeah. Hey, really appreciate the time. Thanks so much. Happy Thanksgiving to your family, and hope you have a great one, and hope to talk to you soon.
You too. It is always fun. It's been too long. I appreciate the time to catch up, and can't wait to see what we get this weekend.
Yeah, no telling. Hey, thanks, buddy. Appreciate you.
All right, man. Take care.
Brett Norsworthy, WHBQ 560 in Memphis, kind enough to join us. Brett, we're full disclosure. I always like to tell people when we talk. This is Sunday afternoon. It's the day after Ole Miss's loss at Florida. You're going to be seeing this a little later in the week. So if some of the timing sounds off, that's why. What happened?
Well, Neal, I think what happened was very different than what happened against Kentucky and against LSU. Against Kentucky and LSU, I think you could really call those two losses the difference in a play in each game. Yesterday was plays. It was more than this play or that play. It was a collection of plays. And the biggest thing that happened, and it's been consistent all year, and it's shocking in the Coach Lane Kiffin era, is can't line up and make a 3rd and 2 with a traditional running back. And could with Quinshawn, and could at times earlier this year against lesser opponents with Henry Parrish. But since Henry Parrish's injury and the lack of Quinshawn, to line up and blast it up in there with a running back on 3rd and 2, hadn't been able to. Really the best runner has been Jackson Dart, and he's playing, I think, very hurt and playing admirably and playing very well. Still can make a case for him being the first-team SEC quarterback. But, Neal, I just have always thought your team, to be a champion, is when the quarterback comes to the line of scrimmage and he can look at that middle linebacker and go, we're running it right here on the second snap count. That's when you're a champion. And this year for Ole Miss, it's just been a struggle in short yardage that then kind of makes you have to do things you really don't want to do, and maybe the overuse of J.J. McGee's just a great youngster and a great player, and I think he might break one eventually, for about a 40-yard touchdown. But when he comes in the game, 80,000 people knows who's carrying the ball.
I know you've been asked this 1,000 times. I've been asked it at least 1,000 times, probably literally at this point. I don't even think I'm being hyperbolic. They brought Ulysses Bentley back. Let's face it, in this NIL era, they paid for him to come back. He probably had some other options. He came back. I've heard the number. It's a handsome figure. He has 200 yards rushing as through 11 games, 50 carries, I think, on the nose. Why has he been so underused? I started to say misused, but I'm not at practice. I don't know if he's being misused or not, but he's not getting many carries at all. When it's logically, you go, well, why don't you give Bentley a shot? And the fans certainly want the answer to that question. The media have asked that question. We've not gotten answers. You're around. You hear things. I hear things. Do you have any clue as to what's going on there?
Neal, I don't. And he's healthy, or he wouldn't be back for kickoff returns. And he's back there, and just about everything's a touchback now for both sides on kickoff. So it's not a lot of return yardage there. And he was really good kickoff returner last year. But it is one of the mysteries of the year. And when he finally got in at LSU, was a big difference in that game. In fairness to him and to the coaching staff, whether he's in there or not, there's not a lot of hole there. There's not a lot. It's not a lot of people being moved around. The offensive line, I think, has struggled. There's been a lot of ankles and foot injuries in the offensive line. It's been a lot of grumbles there all year, and obviously missing Jeremy James, really affected this team. But it hadn't been a lot of hole there, and I'm surprised it hadn't gone more two tight ends, with DeQuan Wright and Caden Prescorn, and really try to move some people around, and maybe JJ more in that blocking role, running behind somebody. But the short yardage running game, I think, is the difference in being, 9-1, 10-1 going into the state game, instead being 8-3. And Neal, we've been around long enough to know, and I have felt it at times of, maybe whether it's from the league office or the national commentariat or whoever that covers the SEC and college football, that sometimes we kind of get the shorter end of the stick. Just kind of being a little bit paranoid. We've all done that. This year, in the release just a few minutes ago of the top AP poll, and I know it doesn't matter anymore, but this is not one of those years when everybody's been out to get us. I mean, even after losing to a particularly bad Kentucky team, maybe even an historically bad Kentucky team that finished the year with one SEC win, and that was against Ole Miss. Ole Miss was right there to move back up and get in the mix of things. Had the great win at South Carolina that I think is a little underappreciated.
Yep.
And undervalued by Ole Miss people. That was a good win that day in Columbia. So then get right back in the mix and have the heartbreak at LSU in overtime. And then you have 2 losses and still get back in the mix until the Florida loss yesterday down in Gainesville. And now there's a scenario. It's far-fetched. My head hurts too bad from getting back from Gainesville yesterday to go through it. But there's a scenario that's not crazy for Ole Miss to get back in that 10 or 11 spot in this college football playoff. It's going to take some upsets, but I don't think some of them are that wild in the SEC.
Let's play it out. So we're talking about Auburn beating Alabama,
right?
Vanderbilt beating Tennessee.
That's the most likely of the two.
You would
South Carolina beating Clemson.
South Carolina beats Clemson, and at that point, if I'm the committee, I'm a little intrigued by Carolina. At this point, if you're taking 3 lost teams, my God, they're a hot one. The interesting thing is going to be this A&M Texas deal. If A&M, which now has 3 losses after, and God, I hate college football's overtime rules. You watch a game, and then it's so bad, and
You'd be better off playing horseshoes.
I've had people ridicule me for this for years. They're like, no, because you know how it is, Brett. Nobody can make fun of college football. Nobody can criticize college football because it's this sacred thing. And all I've said is,
sure, we can.
I'm like, they play for 3.5 hours, and then you change the rules. It's so stupid. It's like my son plays high school.
It was mind-numbing.
They played a high school soccer game the other day against Tupelo. It was 80 minutes, 1-1.
Yeah.
At the end of 80 minutes, they go, okay, well, let's do penalty kicks. No, just either call it a tie or play more soccer, but don't go play a completely different game. No, it's the equivalent of a basketball game. At the end of a basketball game, they're like, all right, let's have a free throw shooting contest.
Worse than that, let's have a 3-point contest.
Yeah, it's stupid. Anyway, so A&M loses. Quinn Ewers is hurt. A&M might beat Texas, give Texas a second loss, would send A&M to the championship game, where in a world where if they beat Georgia, they get an automatic bid. Georgia would have 3 losses because they had to play an extra game. I don't know at that point how you start sorting things out, or I don't know. I've had people today ask me, do you think Ole Miss can get back into it? And I'm like, it's just really far-fetched. Like, I think it probably requires Purdue beating Indiana. It probably requires USC beating Notre Dame. There's a lot of stuff that it would have to be more chaotic.
Probably need Boise nicked up just because they're in front of the rankings.
Yeah. I think the Big 12 is going to be a 1-bid league. I think there's a chance now that the ACC is a 2-bid league because of how good SMU looks. Do they take a 2-loss Miami that loses the championship game to SMU? I don't know. We've never done this before, so we don't really know how they're going
That's the fun part of it, too.
Yeah, we don't know how they're going to sort this thing out. But in a world where Ole Miss doesn't get in, and even in a world where they do, but I'm going to do the doesn't because I think it's more germane to our conversation for right now. Yeah. You and I always see each other in the press boxes, both home and away, and we'll have these little conversations that are typically not even all that football related, but we've said it to one another a couple of times. I'm like, man, I just don't know about their offensive line. I mean, I just don't know. I watch them because I sit there and watch the games with binoculars, and I watch line play, and I'm like, they're just not quite. They're not quite there. Like early in the year, I sort of defended the coaching staff on the Bentley thing because I was like, you just said, I'm like, guys, there's no holes for anybody to go through, and then he busts one against LSU, and you're like, well, maybe you ought to keep trying at least because he's capable, right, of hitting the hole and going. And then the other thing here's the baffling part for me. When they were losing at halftime to Oklahoma, I started working on a column that was just like, you know what? They're just not good enough. Mm-hmm. They're just not very good. And the premise of the column was, if you took away the preseason and all of the hype and all of the rankings and all of that stuff, and you just watched them play, you wouldn't go, this is a championship team. And then they beat Georgia. And not only do they beat Georgia, and I have a ton of respect for Georgia, not only do they beat Georgia, but they beat the shit out of Georgia. They beat the hell out of Georgia. They whipped Georgia up and down the field pretty much.
That was the least Ole Miss could have won that game by, was 18.
Yeah, they could have easily won that game by 30. And Georgia doesn't get beat like that. They just don't. When Georgia gets beat, it's a field goal. It's a fluky play. And the other team, when they get through beating Georgia, they look like they've been through hell and back. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Ole Miss looked fine. I mean, they were celebrating. They were great. I thought
could have played Sunday.
I thought these guys are one of the 4 or 5 teams that have a chance to win the national title. And then Florida happens, and now I'm like, I can't write what I was going to write because they did it. And so now you go, was the Georgia game an aberration? And I don't know the answer to that. I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think the aberrational game was Kentucky. Then the whole LSU things, Tiger Stadium Saturday night, I believe in that. It happened. And yesterday, the number of plays, like I said, it was a play or two, Kentucky, LSU. But it was a number of plays yesterday. Really at 14-14 yesterday, I had that sinking feeling. But, Neal, I know where you're coming from at halftime against Oklahoma, but and you didn't. And I wouldn't agree with that theory of this team is not that good. I think this team is really good. Really, really good. I know we can't, I don't want to sound like Hugh Freeze if you played somebody 9 times, but if I think we went back and over the next 14 weeks, we replayed this college football season again, this, what I think will end up being 9-3, is the worst Ole Miss could have fallen out in this. I think the best is back to those summertime, and boy, weren't those some halcyon days. And we talked about it in Dallas, you with me and me with you, of nobody in the Ole Miss orbit. I don't know many that had 12-0. I'm going to play some fun percentages. I think 0% had 12-0. I think about 60% had 11-1, and then the rest, the other 40%, was 10-2. There was not a world where you would have a polite conversation with anybody over 9-3, and now that's what they're looking at. This is the least best Ole Miss would have been if we could replay the season 9 times. And I kind of hate that theory because that's not how it's done. But this Ole Miss team is good. This personnel's good, but it really misses Quinshon.
It does. It goes back to that. Now that you say that, I remember there was a point in the summer where I always said 10-2. 10-2 was my prediction. And
I had 11-1.
At one point, I said, if you told me I was off, we always play the football gods come down game. And I said, all right.
Yeah, plus or minus.
Yeah, the football gods come down and say, hey, here's the one thing I'm going to tell you is Ole Miss does not go 10-2. And then the football gods just poof, disappear because that's how football gods are. I don't know if you've ever met them. They show up, they tell you something, and then poof, they're gone.
I believe in them.
Yeah. So they come down and they pop into your studio or whatever, and they say, Ole Miss is not going 10-2. There's your information. Poof, they're gone. I went, okay, maybe they go 11-1. And then when I left media days, I wrote my final prediction or whatever, and I said, if you told me I'm off the game, I'd go 9-3. And you're right, I got a lot of pushback. And my pushback was based on, it was just my reluctance was, I worried about the running game. I worried about 2 things, and I think both came to fruition, and I want to get your thoughts on them. One was for as big of a pain in the ass as Quinshon Judkins was, he was, over the last 2 seasons, he was consistently the best running back in the league.
Hoss.
2 years ago, Rocket Sanders at Arkansas was great. Last year, the kid at Missouri, whose name always escapes me, was great. But
Coach Schrader.
Yeah, Schrader. But over those 2 years, Quinshon was elite. And they let him go. I understood in some ways why they did. I think from a timing standpoint, it's clear now that it was mismanaged. Not completely their fault because he's a pain in the ass, but is what it is. And then the other thing that bothered me a little, and I think this absolutely played out, was, I've been on this beat for a long time, and I think I said this on your show. The one thing that kind of bugged me a little with Ole Miss was that I've always noticed that Ole Miss got an absolute ton of mileage out of no one respects us. No one talks about us. We are overlooked. We'll show you. It's us against the world. And all of a sudden, everybody's picking you to go to the damn national semifinal. I mean,
everybody. It wasn't Homer, Brett, or down the middle, Neal. It was the entire college football commentariat.
Yeah, everyone. I mean, the question was not, is Ole Miss going to make the playoffs? It's, hey, do you think they're good enough to win the national title? Well, that's respect.
Right.
They had so much respect that.
I mean, what seed are we going to be?
Yeah, it was like, do you think they get a bye, or do you think they're one of the host teams?
I didn't turn in end of the year vacation time, and way back when I normally do it, and kind of like to take a little time around Christmas holidays. I didn't do it because right here, my quote was, I got to see where Ole Miss is in the playoffs.
Oh, I mean, we always do this family dinner when the girls come home. We usually do it 3 or 4 days before Christmas. We'll book a reservation at St. Leo on the Square in Oxford. It's our favorite place in Oxford. The girls love it. We go. We spend too much money, and we just sort of chalk it up as, hey, this is just our once a year that we're all together. We'll Uber so that we don't run a risk. Everybody can have a glass of wine or whatever. And it's our thing. And this year, Campbell's bringing her boyfriend. They're on their way down to the beach, and then she's going to come back for Christmas. But Campbell was like, hey, I think we're going to come on the 19th. And I was like, oh, babe, I don't know that I'm going to be there. Like, I don't know. And I mean, I was cheering for Ole Miss to host so that, okay, well, we'll book it for the 19th because they're not going to play on the 19th. They might play on the 20th, probably play on the 21st, but they won't play on the 19th. So we'll be good. I mean, we literally were like waiting on the St. Leo thing last week to get that reservation on the 19th because of, I believed Ole Miss was going to the playoff. I mean, that's where I was on it. I was like, please be home. But if they're not at home, if they play it on the 20th and we could do it on the 19th and the 20th wouldn't be until that night, I could get there. And if it's on the 21st, I'll just go on the 20th. It'll be fine. Right. That's the way I was thinking. And,
hey, for that event at St. Leo's, who's needed the Uber the worst? If somebody absolutely couldn't walk, has it been Dad? Has it been Neal?
No, it's usually not me. Although I am often guilty of when the kids come. It's the one fun part about when the kids get to be of age. Is they're like, we're going to go out after dinner. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go out too. It's the one time I'll go out with you, and then so I'm fine after dinner. But like,
and you hurt bad the next day.
2-3 hours later, yeah. I mean, I literally thought. I mean, I even thought at one point, it would suck, but I could go to the dinner, I could leave the dinner, drive to Memphis, spend the night, catch a really early flight, 6 a.m. to wherever I'm going. It would be fun.
Here's another one. I kind of walled off the Saturday of the Heisman ceremony, Saturday the 14th, just in case.
Yeah, it's wild how close they were to all of that. And I mean, we're saying this under the assumption that 9-3 is not going to be enough, and I think it's a pretty safe assumption.
I would. And Neal, you use the football god's term. Here's my term, and I don't mean it negative toward anyone. I just think this is how it always shakes out. I like to say water finds its level. And a little bit like, we had the real dry August, September, and October, and since Halloween, it's rained practically every day. Eventually, those yearly totals fall around each other, and water finds its level. and that kind of in gravity, Sir Isaac Newton, that kind of got Ole Miss this year.
So what's the lesson from this season? I mean, I know there's another game left. I don't know what's going to happen with opt-outs and bowl games. I can't imagine this is going to be a motivated team to go play in the ReliaQuest Bowl or the Tax Slayer Bowl or the Music City Bowl. I mean, I just can't imagine that they're going to give a damn after everything they've been through. What lessons are learned?
Mine is, and I am a huge, and we were talking before we came on, I love Coach Kiffin. He has been the best guy. And I'm not saying it because he's a guy now. Now, I will say I've gotten along during the heat of the moment, during the years there, with every Ole Miss coach. I have. Houston Nutt, Hugh Freeze, Matt, and Coach Kiffin. And I want to. And I told one of those coaches, I'll tell you who it was. It was Hugh Freeze. And he told me he viewed me as a Houston Nutt guy. And I said, Coach, I'm an Ole Miss head football coach guy. Whoever it is, I'm gonna do everything I can to work with him and get along with him and put Ole Miss in the best possible fashion. Lane Kiffin has been the best. He's a normal guy. He's a good guy. He's an all business guy when it's time to be all business. And look what he's done. I tell people, remember what he inherited. I love Matt, but we know that Matt had no chance because it was torpedoed from the beginning for a really fine person in Coach Matt Luke. But remember day one, and I thought yesterday was going to really be the poignant ribbon on it. And I had all my questions post-game centered around it with him. Game one was Florida, and we saw a hint of what it could be. And then yesterday was game 60, and that was Florida. Well, those games in between, 2 through 59 or whatever the math is, we've seen what he can do. So my answer to what we're going to do in the future, keep on doing it. Go to the NIL fundraisers. Go to your money people and tell them, I know we came up short this year, but you want to come up really short? Quit giving. Because here's the difference. Arkansas, they don't have their NIL, they don't have their collective, they don't have their fundraising close to right. And they're celebrating going to a 6-6 bowl. At least Ole Miss is going, we think, to a 9-3 bowl that doesn't look as fashionable as being in the college football playoffs. But if you want to take a hard left back into mediocrity, shut the money off. This is when you go to them and go, I know you give and give and give. Whether it's a campaign for the library, a campaign for building a building on campus, or for athletics, or for anything, tickets, suites, skyboxes. But this is not the time to quit giving. Now, it's easy for me to say since I'm not giving 1 red cent to it. It's always easier to spend other people's money. But I would beg them, this is the time to redouble your efforts. Kind of like it's the big church revival. Send that collection plate around a second time. This is no time to get off the train.
Just as a sidebar, bless his heart, he seems like a great guy. But the tone-deaf look of what they put out from Fayetteville Saturday after the win over Louisiana Tech.
With the bowling ball?
The bowling ball. I'm like, are you guys for real? I mean, are you
serious? That's a Club Dub with Chad Morris.
I mean, are you serious? I watched that and went, you are a million miles away. I mean,
million miles. And you've got a bunch with your daughters, and you know I have a bunch of Arkansas friends, and I love how they want to tell me, well, we don't do that in football. You know, we think there's a you think John Calipari has all those players there just because Northwest Arkansas and it is a great place to live? No. You think they're just up there for funsies?
No. He didn't take that job without knowing he had NIL in his hands.
He saw the books or he doesn't take it. And that's the same thing they're going to eventually get to when they have to replace Sam Pittman. And I'm with you. Everybody, universal, coaching profession, media, we all like Sam Pittman. And he has. Neal and I think you'll vouch for this. My thing at the end of a coaching tenure is answer this simple question. Did he leave it better than he found it?
Yes.
And I think Sam Pittman, if he left today, you could say he has.
Yes.
And resoundingly, you can say that for Lane Kiffin.
No question. No question. I mean, I wrote this in 10 Weekend Thoughts this weekend. I mean, I was
I read
critical.
them every week. I've read them.
Okay, I just said, hey, for some perspective, on the night of the Egg Bowl 2019, if I had told you that, and skip 2020, I just dismissed 2020. I have a rule with 2020. If you had a great season and you want to celebrate it, good for you. Fine,
Yeah.
That is fine with me.
The stupidest year in American history.
Yeah, but if you had an abomination of a year and you just want to go, it didn't happen, I'm cool with that too. I'm totally cool.
Harbaugh did. Michigan did. They had the abomination.
Good for them. I'm like, it didn't count. I don't care. It's fine, whatever. And so for Ole Miss, it was like in the middle. They did some good things, whatever. I don't care. If you want to count it, count it. I'm choosing for the sake of this discussion not to. If you want to, go for it. It's fine with me. But since then, they went, I guess, was it 10 wins, 8 wins?
10-3, 8-5. 10
wins,
11-2.
And now probably 9 wins with the bowl game pending. That's a hell of a mark. Now, it's not the fact that it's not what you want and it's not where you want to get means that he has elevated the expectations of the program. It doesn't change the fact that he has made them more relevant in a extended period of time than anyone since, I'm guessing, Johnny Vaught, which was before my time. So I don't know.
Yeah, these first however many games is the best winning percentage, better than even Coach Vaught.
So I'm curious to see. It's interesting to me that they did so well in the portal on the defensive side of the ball, and they missed so much on the offensive side. I am curious to see whether they go back and go, all right, it's mirror time from an eval standpoint. From a, they took some offensive line.
Oh, he will.
Yeah,
he'll do a hard self-scout.
Yeah, I'm curious about offensive staff. If I'm honest, I'm curious about the way they eval portal, especially up front, because I think they added some guys that probably at the end of the day they could have done better. And then I think he's got to do some. He's got to make some difficult decisions at the quarterback position. I think Austin Simmons is the deal. If I'm him and in a world where Jackson opts out, I don't view it as a horrible thing. I go, okay, well, we're going to do what LSU did last year with Garrett Nussmeier. We're going to have you this is your game. It's going to give that game some purpose, right?
Get you ready to win one game.
Yeah, go get ready and let's see what you can do, because in a world where he's not ready, you got to figure that out, because it's, as we see in this league this year, man, and you've been around it longer than I have, this league's crazy. This league's crazy.
It is crazy. It is crazy, but I thought this was going to be bountiful harvest year at quarterback, and now I'm down to wondering who's going to be first team All-SEC quarterback. It's not Carson Beck. It's not Jalen Milroe after that last night.
No, and it can't be Hughes either.
And it's not Diego Pavia. A good story, but it's not Diego Pavia.
It's a great story, but no.
Great story.
I think I'm voting for Jackson Dart.
I know I will. I know I am.
Yeah.
And I was holding out before yesterday. I have a Heisman vote, and I think I'm going to vote for Travis Hunter. But I was waiting just to see, and he will, Friday at the Egg Bowl, pass Eli Manning, his all-time leading passer. Yesterday had enough to join him as the only two 10,000-yard quarterbacks. I was waiting, and I was going to make my case on this. He touches the ball every single offensive down. That matters.
I was sick for him at the end of the Florida game. He's hurt. That's clear. And yet he's being asked to carry the running game. He's being asked to the passing game. Trey Harris is one of his best friends. I know he was sick to see Trey get hurt and go off the field again the way that he did. That time, with probably in Jackson's mind, I'm guessing there was some finality to that. He's not coming back from that. And
same injury too.
Yeah, it's just sick. And so I just felt really bad for him that it ended for him with interceptions and basically 3 of them, one that got negated properly because the ball hit the ground, but then there was 2, and that's going to be something he thinks about for a long time. And I thought he deserved a better fate. I mean, you get the fate you deserve typically, but I thought he deserved a better one.
And you allude to going forward with Austin Simmons. It's going to be shocking next year on opening day, because we've had in the entire Lane Kiffin run, number 2 running out there at quarterback. well, it was Matt Corral for a long time as number 2, and then it was Jackson Dart, except for the one Luke Altmaier game. It's going to be really something next year in the early part of the season for us to get used to not having these prolific quarterbacks. The quarterback play that Lane Kiffin has had, and I feel like he will continue to have with whoever it'll be, but to not see number 2 running out there taking that first snap, that's going to be shocking. Of course, we might even see it at the bowl game. I don't know if he will or won't, but I don't think anybody could blame him to get good and well.
All right, last couple of things. This Mississippi State game, I thought it was going to be a coronation. I thought it was going to be just a big party in that stadium because State's bad. If you haven't watched them play, they just can't stop anyone. I think Jeff's done a pretty good job getting the guys to play hard.
I love Levy.
Yeah, he's a great. I do too. I like Jeff a lot, and his guys play hard. I think the young freshman quarterback's gotten a little better over time, but they're not. They're not good up front. They're gonna have a hard time keeping him. By the way, he's gonna have some offers. They're not good up front. And then defensively, there's nothing. And so, I mean, I thought it was going to end up just being a big party where Ole Miss is celebrating, probably hosting a first-round game at this point, the way that it's played out. Instead, I think it's going to be something a little different. I think it's going to be kind of sleepy and a little dejected unless chaos is starting to happen all around. What about you?
Very same thing. Neal, I even said last week that for a lot of these big rivalry games, egg, iron, good clean old-fashioned hate, Georgia Tech, Georgia, that we were setting up for the biggest one in the history of those games. Never mind, maybe some years that Alabama and Auburn were 1 versus 2, but you were setting up for egg and iron for sure to be the biggest ever for this reason. Well, the winner, the teams that have dominated, not dominated, but certainly lead in those series, Alabama and Ole Miss. If they win, they're going to the first 12-team playoff. That's historic in and of itself. If the other team, and I hadn't said little brother, I just said the other team, if either Mississippi State or Auburn pull that upset and deny them going to the first 12-team playoff, that would be the biggest win ever for those teams. That they could live forever. Imagine State fans being able to live forever. We cost you your summertime glory. We cost you your year of years, the last dance, the all-in. We cost you. And now instead, it's kind of just moving back to one of those games that the NFL flexes out of.
100%. Yeah, I mean, for State, it lost its luster. Because, I mean, you weren't going to get from 2 to 6. So, I mean, it completely lost their chance to go, hey, let's go spoil it. Let's go wreck it. Let's go be the guy. Of all time. Let's really wreck it. Wreck the perfect game, all that stuff. That's gone. They don't do anything. You knock Ole Miss out of the ReliaQuest and into the Music City.
I do love that game, though. I love the Egg Bowl. I love the atmosphere around it. I do think the toxicity of it was raised by a lot of people that are now no longer at all around it, which I really resent because y'all stirred that pot. I'm talking about Scott Strickland here. Y'all stirred that pot. You hashtagged everything. You made it everything. You created all of this angst. A little bit Ross as well. I'll give Ross his doing this. We stir that pot, and then Scott's off to Florida. Ross is off to A&M, now at Ohio State. And we're kind of left with this year-round enmity that we didn't always have around the Egg Bowl, Neal. Yes, on that day, no doubt. And for the weeks afterwards, to the victor go the spoils. And if State won, to paraphrase Jack Crystal, the State was maroon and white for a year. If Ole Miss won, it was red and blue for a year. But we could go off and go back to church and go to the golf course and go to the Rotary Club and go uptown and go out to eat. And it wasn't that constant thump of Egg Bowl mania. And Scott Strickland and several people, I'll give Dan Mullen and Hugh Freeze their blame, credit for it as well. They took it to, we almost need the 82nd Airborne outside the stadium. And we weren't always like that. Because I'm going to be Thanksgiving with Mississippi State people. It never comes up. And the late, great George Bryan, 1 year at Old Waverly, and the game was being played that night. He told people, don't show up with logo stuff on for lunch. I don't want to see it. This is not what we're going to be about. We're going to eat lunch. We're going to have fun, and we're going to live together. And we always have. Of course, the winner gets to strut, and the loser. And this is the sad fact of the Egg Bowl. Both sides used to. The winner got to talk, and the loser clammed up. The loser almost talks more in defeat than the victor does now.
Yeah, I don't know a lot of people in those circles, and so it's wild to me because I've covered this rivalry for a long time, and it's the one I don't really know much about. I covered the Iron Bowl and lived Alabama for a while, and in that state, it's almost just
know it well
down your throat. But it was different. I would tell people this: Alabama and Auburn had such fear of one another / respect of one another that there really wasn't a lot of trash talked. It was a pretty clean game. And then they would almost laugh at the Egg Bowl with the brawls and the crazy stuff and all that. They're like, man, it doesn't happen here. And it didn't. In fairness to the Alabama-Auburn game, it just didn't. I mean, it was all year long, and everybody talked about it all the time. And
you had to take a side.
I've told this story. I'll tell it again because it's a funny rivalry week story. You got a minute? You'll like this.
Sure.
So our oldest, Campbell, was in kindergarten at I think it was Spanish Fort Elementary School. We'd moved across the bay, bought a house in Spanish Fort because I think at that point we thought we were going to be there for a long time. And so we were like, we don't want to pay for the Mobile private schools, so we need to move across the bay. And so we move across the bay, and at the time, the Spanish Fort School District is just kind of getting started. It's a behemoth now. It's tons and tons of people, but it was getting big. And Campbell, I got home from the radio show the week of, I guess it was the week before, maybe early in the week of Iron Bowl. And Laura says, Campbell's really upset. You need to go talk to her. And I said, okay. And I went up. She's real upset. And she says, I don't want to go to school naked. And I said, well, you're not going to school naked. What are you talking about? The teacher said that on Alabama-Auburn Day, we have to wear Alabama, Auburn, or nothing. And I said, no, baby. I'm sure that's you didn't hear that right. I promise. It's okay. We'll figure it out. And so our next door neighbor was this big Florida Gator fan, had a big Gator flag in the backyard, the whole deal. I mean, he was one of those people that his kids weren't wearing a stitch of anything that wasn't UF. And so I call him, I can't remember his name now, but I call him, and he had a little girl in Campbell's class. And I called him and I was like, hey, ask whatever her name was, I can't remember, what the teacher said about Alabama-Auburn Day. And he goes, about what? I said, Alabama-Auburn Day. Just ask. And he goes, all right, hang on. And I hear him yelling in their house. And, hey, what did the teacher say? And the little girl said, that we have to wear Alabama, Auburn, or nothing. And I was like, oh, no. And he says, I'm not sending her to school with anything Florida. And at this point, I'm a columnist in Alabama. And I'm like, the last thing I'm doing is sending my kid to school in one or the other, because some teacher's going to take a picture and it's going to end up being a thing. And see, McCready's a Bama fan. See, McCready's an Auburn fan. I always knew he was an Auburn homer, all of that stuff. And I was like, well, we're not doing that. And
you're not a homer for anybody.
I sent Campbell to school in an Alfonso Soriano jersey, a T-shirt jersey.
Yes.
And of course, my neighbor sent his kid to school decked out in Florida gear.
Did any other little children wear other gear?
Not many. For the most part, everybody did the thing where you pick a side, and both of my parents went to Alabama, and I mean, I could have easily just said, well, we have Alabama ties. I'll just do the Roll Tide thing. But I was like, if I send my kid to school wearing Roll Tide stuff, someone's going to see it and make a deal of it. And it's going to end up being a topic of conversation on my radio show, stuff like that.
You get pride.
I don't want to go there. Yeah.
The closest I ever came to leaving the Memphis market, I was on my co-host. I wasn't wild about, and I was just kind of getting the itch to do something different. And I was offered a job in the state of Alabama, and I was close to taking it. and kind of the proverbial, like all these coaching searches, if they go, let me go home and think about it. They never see them again because they go back and they get talked into it. And I wasn't trying to do that to the radio station. I really wasn't. But I got home, and I think you can appreciate this. I said, there's three things I don't want to have to do every day. I don't want Iron Bowl every day. And I would easily be the Alabama persuasion, easily. But I don't want to hear that rat-a-tat-tat every single day. There's no way I can talk Atlanta Braves baseball every day, and I will never speak one syllable of NASCAR. So I called him. I said, I'm the wrong guy for the job.
Yeah. They would get mad at me in Mobile at radio because I would be like, it's June. Do we really have to do football for 3 hours? I can't do it for 3 hours all summer long. There's only so many days you can preview the season. And they're like, no, you don't get it. It's religion here. And after a while, I began to realize it was absolutely religion there. I mean, like you see the TV numbers out of Birmingham for the Ohio State-Michigan game. It's unbelievable.
Stunning.
It's stunning. Yeah, exactly. The Toledo-Kent game on Thursday on
anything.
It's unbelievable. You're like, this is crazy, but
and it's why I love the guys and gals at Jocks because they know their market and they know if you want a shovel full of college football, we're giving you a shovel and a half full of college football.
Yep.
I like that, but I like the diversity. I like talking NBA. I like Major League Baseball. I like golf. Love the NFL. I like talking to, of course, college basketball. And when it gets around to college football time, I think we do it sufficiently, and I love doing it. But Neal, you know me well enough. Number one to me is still baseball and the Cardinals. One of the few things we have ever really disagreed on is the whole Cardinal Cup thing. But baseball is still one, and 1A is college football.
I'm so checked out on the Cubs. I don't even. Right now, you could tell me the Cardinals are going to go win the World Series, and I'd be like, all right, whatever. I mean,
I'm getting checked out on the Cardinals.
It's hard, man. And that's one of the problems with Major League Baseball is when you have the huge spenders and you have teams that are kind of insistent on being very budgetary. It's probably.
But when you get there, when you get to a game live, it feels one of my favorite things. Neal, I think if but for growing up where I did, and a lot of our parochialism with college football, Neal, I fully admit if I'd grown up in Ely Rye, Ohio, I could see me being an Ohio State fan. If I'd grown up in East Tennessee, I could see bathing in Big Orange, in a lot of places like that. But baseball, and if I'd have grown up, in Houston, I'd probably be an Astros fan. But I grew up where I did and fell in love with Jack Buck, Mike Shannon, the Cardinals, and that brand and the winning. And when I'm at Busch Stadium, this is one of the more nostalgic things I share with people. When I'm at Busch Stadium for like that 7 o'clock June 28th game, and when daytime gives way to nighttime and I'm sitting at the ballpark, that's one of the most tranquil, peaceful feelings I have.
Oh, I totally relate to that. I will. One of my favorite things to do is to be in Chicago and hop on the L and go up to Wrigley by myself and just sit and watch a game. I can just sit and watch a game and have a beer, and it's totally.
I love being alone.
And the feeling is, and you got it right, is the feeling is it's peace. It's just kind of this calm thing. It's kind of my little calm place. I totally get what you're saying. All right.
And I tell people, while I have never, I'm lucky. I know I'm lucky. I'm very lucky in a lot of ways. I have never had a lonely day in my life. Never. But I love being alone. And when I love going to Major League Baseball by myself because I tell people I'm not leaving early. I don't need to participate in the 50-50 raffle. I'm fine just sitting here. I don't need to do the wave. At World Series time, I don't need to wave the towels. I was at a Pirates divisional game, and the Cardinals wanted to advance to LCS. Matt Adams hit a big home run, and the guy sitting by me, get up, wave your towel, get up, get into the game. I go, I'm fine. He said, wave your towel. I said, only at World Series. It's the only time I wave the stupid towels.
Yeah. I don't even remember waving the towel at the World Series. I just remember the only been to one World Series game in my whole life. It was Game 3 of the 2016 World Series, and Cleveland won, I guess, 1-0. That was it. But it was a phenomenal game. But the game was so intense that I don't remember doing anything with the towel other than probably biting it. I was
Right. I was happy for you winning that World Series. I really was.
I appreciate that. I've told people this. Dave Womack, the former Ole Miss defensive coordinator.
Love Dave and Kane.
Yeah, both great people. Dave was one of the favorite people I've ever covered, and Dave's a big Cardinals fan. He sure is. He loves the St. Louis Cardinals, and I covered him for several years. And the Cubs weren't always good in those years. And in 2015, the Cubs beat the Cardinals in a division series, and I didn't say a word. I didn't say one word. And at one point, he looked at me. He goes, "Just say it." And I said, "No, I'm not saying it." He goes, "Just say it." I was like, "No, I'm not saying it." And in 2016, this is how classy Dave Womack is. They were that was a bad year, and there was a lot of blame being put on Dave. A lot of recruiting failures had happened on the defensive side of the ball that weren't his fault. They were
Mickey Juarez.
Yeah, they were Hugh's fault, and Dave was paying the price for it. But he was being a good soldier all the way to the end. And the Cubs won that World Series in November of 16. And I want to say it was the Saturday after that. Ole Miss played Georgia Southern. It was the game Chad Kelly got hurt. And Ole Miss beat Georgia Southern. And in the post game, Dave looks over at me and said, "I hate the Cubs, but I was happy for you."
He would.
And I was like, "Thanks, man." He's a good dude. That was like one of those cool things, like because I would never have said anything, but
Neal, I can remember Dave. He may have GA'd the year after at Arkansas for Lou Holtz, but I think in '82 the two GAs were a guy named Mike Tollison, who went on to a good college coaching career, and John Thompson, that was later at a lot of places, including at Ole Miss for Ed Orgeron. And Johnny and I grew up in the same hometown. And the next year, Dave, I think in '83, Dave Womack was a GA for Lou Holtz. So I kind of knew all the GAs, and what you see is what you got with him. And that, now I see Kane rising to. I think he'll be a superstar. He'll be a head coach soon.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's inevitable. He's one of those guys that knows how to run a program. He's just a great human being. His wife's awesome. They're really nice people. It's him and John Summerall and some of those guys that were around. Those are just,
Summerall's great, isn't he?
Summerall's a stud now. I mean, I didn't mean to go back to this, but I'll ask real quick. I'm curious what you have a lot of Arkansas ties. I'm curious what you think. They have an opportunity to do something that's very difficult, which is to be the only guy walking into the bar, if you will. Not much competition. Do they act on that, or do they roll with Pittman for another year, because it's not going to get any better?
I think they stay with Sam Pittman another year, and if they do that, what if Kentucky jumped out there this year and did something with Stoops and grabbed John? And I don't know if it's his dream job, but it is his alma mater, and they gave him the shot. And Alabama and Auburn's going to pay dearly for not giving him a scholarship, because he's going to come back plenty motivated to play both of them.
Yeah, he's a winner now. Won at Troy.
He's a big time winner. And we remember his brother. You remember his brother? It was in sports information at Alabama.
I guess I've never made that connection.
Yeah, John had a brother that was in the SID office at Bama. 2000. I'm getting early 21st century. Yeah, but okay. I love John and his years at Ole Miss. He was great. He's a football coach.
Well, Brett, thank you for the time. Happy Thanksgiving to
anytime,
you, to all your family, and
thank you.
Really appreciate it. And I'll see you on Friday.
You got it, Neal. Thank you so much for having me anytime.
This is a treat for me as a Cubs fan to get to introduce Taylor McGregor into the show. She works with Marquee Network, which covers the Chicago Cubs. She's also a sideline reporter for ESPN. She'll be in Nashville on Saturday for Tennessee Vanderbilt. Taylor, it's really an honor to have you here. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me on. And I love fans who connect with both the Cubs and college football. So love to have those types of conversations with you. And I will say, I did the Ole Miss South Carolina game earlier this season, and I've never had more people come up to me saying they were Cub fans than when I did that game. I mean, it's amazing how many people on the Ole Miss staff are Cub fans. I had no idea. There's a Cubs fandom presence in Oxford, Mississippi.
I mean, mine started sort of typically with the way that most people's do my age. You know, I grew up in North Louisiana, and there was no team. And I had an uncle that was in Houston, and so we would get to go see games sometimes. And we saw the Cubs play, I guess, a time, I don't know, a little. And then the WGN came to your cable network, and all of a sudden you can watch the Braves every day and you can watch the Cubs every day. And to a kid in North Louisiana, Chicago just looked like this magical place, you know, like Wrigley Field and all that stuff. And then when I was 14, they made that run in the playoffs, and I was in. I was just completely, you know, Ryan Sandberg and all of those people. And so I've watched way more Cubs baseball over the last 40-something years than I probably should have, Taylor, if we're honest.
No, we love it.
That time back. You know, you'd be like, what would I do productively with that time? But I always tell people I used to, especially when I was in my college years and stuff, I sort of marked time by the Cubs, you know. So I'm curious, because here's my impression from the outside, is that Boog Shambi, Jim DeShays are really different people. They do a great job. I'm sure they get along great, but they're really different people. And you always seem to be able to sort of interact with both of them kind of seamlessly. Is that a accurate perception?
Yeah, I would say Boog and JD certainly have their unique personalities. I appreciate the fact that you can kind of sense the camaraderie that we all have, because I think that's what makes our show awesome. And we all just love each other. We love being around each other. And, you know, part of what makes my job fun is not what you see on the air, but what you don't see off the air. And it's all the time that I spend with those guys, the relationships I've built with them and with everybody else, because to your point about watching too much Cubs baseball, it's an everyday sport. So, you know, my life in the summer is the Chicago Cubs. That's what I do. And so I just think what you see on air is a culmination of all the time off of the air, because, you know, we're around each other so much, and it's what makes the job fun. And hopefully for the viewer, it's what makes the show enjoyable.
How did you end up in Chicago? Because I know you grew up in Denver. You went to Arkansas. You went back into that market. I think you went to Wyoming for a while first, right? You were in Casper.
I did.
And then you got back with the Rockies. You grew up. Your dad was, I guess, the president of the Rockies before he passed away in 2010. Getting to work for that organization, was that like a dream come true? Was that something you even thought about doing? How did that sort of come about?
Yeah, it was surreal, honestly. I always said it was, you know, I feel very fortunate to have been able to grow professionally in the same hallways that I grew up as a kid. And I think what was the coolest for me is being introduced to the broadcasting world at the Major League Baseball level, and also having the chance every single day to hear stories about my dad, the people he touched every single day, and just have people surrounding me who loved my dad and, you know, and inherently loved me. And I'm very thankful for that. So it was certainly surreal. My first year in Colorado was 2018, with the Rockies, I should say. And really what happened was the guy who had been the reporter, Mark Stout, left. He decided to go into radio full time, and the job was open. I had interned with what was then Root Sports. It became AT&T Sports Network, no longer exists. But I had a lot of relationships with people on the broadcasting side because I had interned there. And so when Mark left, I just reached out and said, hey, you know, I would really be interested in this job. At that point, I had 2 years in Wyoming and about a year in Little Rock, Arkansas. So I felt like I had enough experience to maybe have a chance. And, you know, fortunate for me, they took a chance on me and really helped me grow. And then just fast forward to 2018, when I was talking about, it was like that they were really good that year. They had a chance to win the NL West. It went to game 163 with the Dodgers. And down the stretch, I was only doing like 100 games that year. And so in September, I wasn't on every game, but every game in September was so big and so meaningful. And I would just like show up to the ballpark and my boss would be like, you need to go home, like get out of here, get a life. And so, I cared so much about the success of the team and I wanted to be around. And so it was just it really was a dream come true, not only because of the Rockies and my connection with my dad, as I talked about, but also just the people there on the broadcasting side who really took me in as a very, very green reporter and were kind enough to teach me and allow me to grow under their watchful eye. It was 2 of the best years of my career thus far.
When you had a chance to go to Chicago to a organization that's as high profile as the Cubs, was that just kind of a no-brainer, or was it difficult to leave home?
No, it was not a no-brainer. It was actually a very grueling decision. So basically what had happened was GN, NBC Sports at Chicago, all that was going away to make room for the Marquee Sports Network, which was going to be the official TV home of the Cubs. And for the first time ever, all the games were going to be on one regional network. And so anyways, the guy who was helping launch that network, I had a lot of connections with because I had interned at Major League Baseball Network when I was in college, MLB Network. So kind of had some connections, and I had someone reach out to me and say, hey, this job's opening. I think you should really go for it and like try to get it. And I was like, no, I'm in Colorado. I'm home. I'm around all my friends and family. Like, I love this gig. And they were like, but it's the Cubs. Like, you really should go. It would be, I would be the full-time reporter. Cause in Colorado, again, I was only doing like 100 games. So I wasn't the only reporter. But it was just, a bigger job, bigger market, all the things. And I just started praying about it. And I really felt like my heart changed. And I was like, you know what? I do need to give this a chance. And then I went to Chicago. I met with the people who were launching the network and it just felt right. I was like, this just feels right. And, at the time AT&T was kind of going through some transition too. And so I wasn't able to get a full-time job there. And so it kind of just was like a lot of things came together that just pointed to Chicago. And I could not be more thankful that I took the job because I've loved my time in Chicago. I've loved the Cubs organization. Marquee's been great. And I feel like we have something special on our broadcast every night.
Yeah, you really do. It's such a massive fan base. Right now, most of them are pretty frustrated, but it's a massive fan base nonetheless. Can you go anywhere in Chicago where people don't recognize you?
It's funny. I get asked that a lot. Honestly, I'm pretty incognito. I live a pretty normal life. I don't know if I just look like a basic white girl. I don't know. Like it's funny because I certainly do get recognized, but it's nothing crazy. But it's when I write my name at restaurants, like on checks and stuff, that's when I get it the most. Like, people will come back to me, they're like, oh, like, you work for the Cubs. And I was like, yeah, it's funny that you didn't recognize me, but then I write my name down on a sheet of paper and you do. So I don't know, maybe I look a lot different on TV than in person. I don't know. I feel like I live a normal life in Chicago, which is part of what makes the job awesome. It's just a great city, especially in the summer. It's hard to beat. And I really love my life in Chicago.
You're in the dugout pretty much with the players, right? I mean, I know you're in a little cubicle over on the side. So 2 things. One, you sort of see and hear everything. Is there sort of a understanding that not everything you see and hear is to be reported, but yet sometimes it gives you some background to when you talk to a player after a game or when you're talking to players before games to kind of have insights for the broadcast?
Yeah, and I would say that's the life of a journalist, sports journalist. Like, sometimes you see things and it's not really reportable, and there's a balance there. And obviously, we're team partners with the Cubs, so it's on a different level with the Cubs. But they've really been great to me. It's not like they're sitting there trying to filter everything I'm saying. That's not what it is. It's more just like, I feel like I know what should and should not be reported, and we just kind of go from there.
Do you have a favorite post-game interview, one that sticks out or that that you enjoyed the most? Because I know there's probably some where you know you're going to get doused. You know you're probably the water's coming, the Gatorade's coming, or whatever the case may be. So you're looking out for that. But you're also trying to let fans hear from players that they follow all the time. I mean, it's kind of an opportunity to get to know them on a little different level. Are there one or two that stick out?
You know, it's funny. You asked this question. I've been asked this before. And like the ones that stand out are the walk-off interviews and the drama and like the excitement. And like this dude hits a homer or a walk-off hit, whatever it may be. And you have like this much time to think of your questions because you're reacting in the moment. And so like those are challenging, also really fun and exciting and certainly the most memorable. But I will say some of the best post-game interviews I've had have been in, you know, game 110 where maybe fans at home don't remember it, but you get the player to say something really insightful. And I'll point to Dansby Swanson. Like he's very insightful. I mean, he's a really smart guy. And he, when asked good questions, can be really insightful. And I remember 2 years ago, we were playing the White Sox on the South Side and the Cubs came from behind. I think they scored like 7 or 8 runs unanswered and ended up winning the game. And I was asking about the information that Dansby had gotten on the iPad going into an at-bat. And he like broke it all down for me and was like this, and this. And I was like, and just like moments like that are memorable to me because it's such valuable, good information because not every walk-off interview, post-game interview is going to be that way. So when you get real information, those are the ones that always stand out.
Yeah, you just described the Lane Kiffin experience. If you ask him a really good question that's kind of big picture, you get this really insightful answer. And as he's giving it, you're like, oh, I hit a home run on that one. And if you ask a really crappy question that's just so topical and you can tell right away his eyes glaze over and you're like, screw it. This is going to be a video. Everybody's going to see this. And they're going to be like, oh, does Kiffin hate you or something? It's like, no, it's just a bad question. It was one of those things. And you're right. And a lot of times you have a lot of time to think about it. And sometimes, like what you're talking about, like an inning, I mean, a guy hits a home run, he runs around the bases, they rip his jersey off, all that stuff, and now he's right there with you. And it's like, okay, ask something. And if you stumble right there, you know immediately.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And honestly, let's be real here. A lot of it is on us as the reporter to ask these good questions and be on our toes, ready to go. But some of it is the mood of the interviewee. And you know, there's been moments when I'm like, I feel like that was a really good question and they did not receive it very well. And other times it's the opposite, right? Where you're like, I didn't feel like that was a home run question, but it elicited an amazing response. So, you know, sometimes there are other factors at play, but I always say the best questions are the ones that elicit the best responses. So sometimes you get lucky and sometimes they get unlucky.
So when football starts to overlap, I know you went to Arkansas. You went to an SEC school. You're familiar with SEC football. You're doing it and stuff. Is it challenging? Is it difficult to sort of get into the, hey, I'm doing Cubs Monday through Friday, and then all of a sudden I'm heading out to Columbia, South Carolina, or wherever, and I'm going to do this game, and then I'm back into the Cubs routine? Do you have to extra preparation, or do you just sort of wing it, or how's that work?
I would say the hardest part is the scheduling, talking to players, coaches during the week while managing a Cubs schedule where, you know, you're in at 2 p.m. and then you're not out till 11 and like trying to figure out, okay, well, how am I going to talk to these players? I mean, literally there have been times when I will call a player 5 minutes before the broadcast starts because that's the only time. And I'm like, trying to like, all right, what am I about to say on live TV? Hey, hold on. Like, what do you got on this offensive line? You know what I mean? And it's like madness. So that's the hardest part. And then the other part too, that's tricky is getting back for the Sunday day games. Because there have been, times when I remember the worst one I've had was we did a game a couple of years ago in Starkville, Mississippi, a night game. So it started at 7 Eastern. So you're done like 10:30, 11. And then you have to drive back to Birmingham because that was the best place to fly out to then get back to Chicago Sunday morning. So it's like drive back to Birmingham. You get in at like 1 or 2 in the morning and then you have a 5 a.m. flight to get to Chicago by 7 or 8 to then be at the ballpark by 9 a.m. You're just like rolling in, like, I don't know where I am, but here we go. We're going to roll with it. And like, this is the life I chose and I love it. And I wouldn't have it any other way. So, and I only have to do it for a month. I work with Dave Pash, who does the Cardinals all fall. So he's doing it throughout the whole season. So I really can't complain, but I would say that those are the kind of the trickiest stuff, is the stuff during the week. And then, getting to your game on Sunday.
Easier to interview baseball players or college football coaches? Because college football coaches can be weird cats. I mean, they're some of the. I mean, I'm not criticizing. Journalism. We have a lot of weird cats in journalism too, but college football coaches are a different breed. I mean, especially on game day.
Yeah. I think for me, the most challenging part about the college football side of things is, you don't, at least for me, I mean, you're on the Ole Miss beat, so you have a relationship with Lane Kiffin. Like, I am diving into 2 new programs every week. So the depth of my relationships with these coaches is nothing like it is with the baseball players, because I'm around those guys every single day for 6 months, and often, and a lot of them I've been around for years. So like, I know their families, I know their kids, their wives, like their day-to-day things that are going on. And so it's just a totally different dynamic. And there's a totally different trust level there, simply because I'm around so much more. So that's the part for me that is the most challenging, of like, okay, how do I get these coaches to trust me with valuable information? And like, again, get them to be able to be loose enough to elicit good responses to my questions. And that's kind of what I find the most challenging for my job in particular. But listen, I think anybody in a high pressure situation, like it can be on Saturdays in college football, like that can make anybody a little wacko. So sometimes it's a crapshoot.
Yeah, sometimes it's just funny to me, because it's like I was speaking to a class at your alma mater, and someone was asking about sideline reporting and something like that. And it was like, hey, you got to understand something, that you're dealing with people coming off a field who it probably often didn't go the way they wanted it to go. They feel the pressure. They know what's coming up. Maybe they already sense that things aren't going their way. They're disappointed. And really the last thing they want to do is talk to you. And you have to be really prepared. You have to be really knowledgeable. And it's still so very easy. Like I said, I mean, like you mentioned, I cover Ole Miss. I'm around them all the time, and I'll still ask stupid questions. But if I ask a stupid question in a moment, they just kind of look at you like whatever. But if you ask a stupid question, it's on television. The coach is not, unless he is feeling charitable, he can take it almost kind of like look at you funny, and it becomes this kind of viral moment. There's a lot of pressure on those people, and I'm like, those are not the easy jobs that some people think they are. It's not just a pretty face holding a microphone. There's some pressure in that moment to get it right.
No doubt about it. I mean, I've seen the interview a couple years back with Maria Taylor and Nick Saban with the quarterback controversy at the beginning of this season. And she had to ask that question, and she had confidence in asking the question. And he was sick of hearing that question and, didn't give a great response. But I thought she handled it really well. And I think in order to be in these high pressure situations, like, you have to be able to think on your toes and react well in those situations. So there's a lot more that goes into it than I think meets the eye. So I'm glad that you gave that response. So when you were speaking to the class, because I think those are the things that not everybody realizes when they want to get into this profession.
So you're basically covering a playoff game Saturday in Nashville. I mean, if Ole Miss beats Mississippi State, there are going to be a lot of Vanderbilt fans in Oxford and surrounding areas on Saturday. Has the whole playoff race changed covering college football?
Yes, without question. It's been so great for the sport.
Yep.
I did the Arizona State BYU game, and that game had playoff implications on Saturday. A year ago, well, really ever, that game never has playoff implications. You know what I mean? Like that, nobody cared about that game when it came to the college football playoff, because there were 4 teams and those 2 were not getting in. And so that's been awesome. Just the way that it's shined a light on a lot of new programs, new cities, made games matter in November that would never have mattered for the playoff in years past. So that's been great. And, my game on Saturday, let's go over some of the SEC on ABC games. I mean, obviously the Egg Bowl still matters for Ole Miss. And there's still a chance that Ole Miss could get into the playoff. Now it's much smaller than it was prior to the loss, but it's not completely out of the question. So you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not quite the Jim Carrey gift, but it's close.
It's quite close. And then you have Georgia. So you have the Colorado, Oklahoma State game Friday morning. Then Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Georgia Tech. Our game on ABC at noon on Saturday, which is Vanderbilt, Tennessee. The Iron Bowl, again, not what it was, but there will still be eyes on that game. And then, of course, the big one is Texas A&M, Texas. And, you could make an argument all of those games matter for the playoff. And a year ago, maybe one of them matters, maybe two, if we're lucky two. So, it's just great. And then even, I know on the ESPN network that on noon we have South Carolina, Clemson, which there's an outside shot still that Clemson could get in. And so it's so great for the sport. All of these games matter. It's great for the fan bases. And it's been so much fun to cover this season.
I did not realize you were in Tempe last week. Is Kenny Dillingham, he okay?
Oh, did you see the viral video? Because everybody has sent it to me. I'm standing right next to him when he was losing it on the refs. So if you haven't seen it,
I'll have to go search for it. I was doing post game from Ole Miss, Florida when that game was going on. And so I was staring at this screen and the TVs are behind me and I'm turning around to look occasionally what's going on in the rest of the college football world. But no, I didn't. I knew about the fans stormed the field too early, and even the goalposts went down, but there was time on the clock, and I did see some of the pictures of Dillingham just completely losing his mind, and that guy's intense.
Yeah, I was right there for it. It was great. That was my first time meeting Coach Dillingham. I loved our time with him. He's so real. He's so honest. And the thing that I've said to multiple people, it's not very often you have a really successful coach whose dream school is Arizona State.
Yeah.
And his genuinely is. And I think that's awesome for the program. It's awesome for the Valley. And it was really special being there and seeing just his passion for that university, for that program, and for them to have the success they have this season. I loved watching it front row. I'm all about passion in college football, and he lost his mind, but I'm all for it. Let's go. This is, if you weren't energetic and passionate in that moment, I would question your desire to really be in this seat. You know what I mean? So it was great.
Yeah, he's one of those people that you can tell, you can tell off the field that he's probably the complete polar opposite of what happens when the game starts, and just the light goes on, and it's you've turned it on, and there's no turning it off until the game's over, right? I mean, it's gonna go, and yeah, he's fun. They're a program. You're exactly right that in just last season we wouldn't be talking about them. They'd be off the radar. Now they look like a team that could easily win the Big 12, and if they got into the playoff and got the right draw, they could make some noise, and that's the fun of the sport. No one's having fun with it here right now because Ole Miss ran into Florida, and Florida was hot, and they beat LSU and then beat Ole Miss, and they're playing spoiler now. So Ole Miss is left to beat Mississippi State and then hope for chaos elsewhere. I'm not going to keep you much longer. Curious, what are your favorite SEC venues to cover a game? And you can include your alma mater, but excluding your alma mater.
Okay, so fun fact: I have never covered a game for ESPN in Fayetteville. So if my bosses are listening, please give me a game in Fayetteville. I really want to go. I've had them on the road, but I've never.
Right?
What'd you say?
You did Arlington this year, I think, right?
I did. Yeah, I had them at Oklahoma State this year, and then in Dallas at Jerry World. So I've had them on the road before. I had them at Florida last year and whatever, you could go down the list, but never in Fayetteville. So I'm looking forward to covering a game there eventually. But I tell people Oxford's my favorite town in the SEC. I love the city of Oxford. It's so great. The electricity on game weekend is fabulous. The Grove is amazing. When I was in college, if you remember the punter, Tyler Campbell.
Yeah.
Okay, so his cousin was one of my best friends in college. And so we would go down for a couple of games in college. And I was like, oh, like the tailgate in the Grove is unmatched. And the tailgates in Fayetteville are fun, but it's just nothing like the Grove. And so
it's completely different.
Yeah. Love the game day vibe in Oxford. I'm going to be honest, as much as this probably pains Ole Miss fans too, like LSU at night is really special and it's so loud in there. Oh my gosh. That's really cool. They're all unique in their own way. I did the LSU Florida game a couple weeks ago, and in the swamp, I mean, it was bumping, and Tom Petty comes on going into the fourth quarter. And for us, we had the 3:30 game, so it was dark by the time Tom Petty rolled around, and that was really, really cool to experience. I had done a noon game there before, and noon games are just a little different than, when it gets dark out. So that place is awesome. And I mean, I could go down the list. And that's a terrible answer because you're like, give me one. But I don't know if I really have one. I've enjoyed experiencing them all. That's part of what makes my job fun is you kind of get to pick and choose the things that you like from each town. And we get really lucky in the SEC because you could make a case for all of them, which is special.
Yeah, earlier in my career when I was in Mobile and I was covering the league as a whole, it was my favorite part, was getting to go to different places and see the different things because they're all, like you said, they're all different, but they all have some different cool things and a completely different kind of vibe to them that's hard to explain. And it's why, it's the league's as competitive as it is that everybody's as dialed in as they are. And it's why we're not all that far away from a whole bunch of 3-loss teams. And people go, well, does that mean the SEC sucks? And it's like, no, it just means it's really hard to win on the road in the SEC, and you've seen it all year this year with Alabama losing at Vanderbilt and Tennessee losing at Arkansas and Georgia losing at Ole Miss and Ole Miss losing at Florida. And, I mean, the list goes on.
Yeah.
And LSU is just really hard to go win on the road in this league.
No doubt. I remember a couple years ago when Brian Kelly, it was after his first year, I believe, in the conference at LSU, and we were meeting with him, and I asked, like, has there been something that surprised you about the SEC? Because he had come from Notre Dame, which is still big-time football.
Yeah.
And he said, I had no idea how hard it was to win on the road every single week. And I think that's a testament to all these environments in these college towns. Like, these places are rocking, and it's really hard to go into these atmospheres week in and week out. It's not like, and I know Nick Saban said this on game day, and now it just feels like we're a commercial for the SEC. And that's not my intention. I just think it's honest. Like he said, when he's talked to players who are now at Ohio State, who had been at I think it was Caleb Downs he was talking about, who had been at Alabama, now at Ohio State. They went to Oregon, and it was like they had kind of had 3 or 4 easy games before playing at Oregon. In the SEC, it's like you have 3 or 4 hard games, and then, oh, by the way, you have to go play at Georgia. You know what I mean? So it's just a completely different environment. There are no off weeks, and I think you've seen that this year really play out with the amount of losses that these teams are stacking up.
Yeah, I was, you talk about LSU at night. Ole Miss played there back in mid-October, and Ole Miss kind of had a lead and they couldn't quite finish it off, and LSU kept coming back, and that fourth quarter rolled around and they did the Colin Baton Rouge thing, and you're like, this place is about to go bonkers. And they've been drinking all day, and they've been handing out the lighted bracelets, and all of a sudden the wristbands and they're all flying in the air, and someone goes, man, somebody in the room didn't play this one all the way out, did they? And I was like, no, they were like, this will look so cool. And it did. It looked awesome. And like, you had to know those things are going to be flying. But that place, to your point, was so loud late that the noise impacted the game. I mean, you could feel the noise like reverberated. I was wearing an Apple Watch, and it kept doing the, hey, you need to get to a quieter place thing, and I'm like, hey, there's nothing I can do right now, but
that's amazing.
and then, and then a few weeks ago in Oxford, which is not the biggest stadium in the league, I was down on the field in the last few minutes as Ole Miss was finishing off Georgia, and it was deafening. And it was like, man, I was just thinking, I remember thinking about that, how just always those kinds of environments, Jordan-Hare at Auburn, and the loudest place I've ever covered a game was actually Williams-Brice in South Carolina back in 2008, when it was the first night they introduced Sandstorm, and they just played it over and over and over and over and over. They didn't really have a place for it yet. They just started playing it, and the place just was, you literally couldn't hear. You couldn't hear anything, and it's what makes the league fun. It's what makes the league hard, but it's really fun.
Yeah, I'm dying to get back to Oxford. I have not been back in a couple of years, and I, gave a lot of praise for the Grove, but if I'm honest, like the actual stadium experience, I hadn't ranked it as high in the conference, but I've heard in the last couple of years, they've completely changed it, and it's really awesome. So I look forward to getting back to Oxford, hopefully next season for a game, because I've heard they've done a really good job there, and just, it was already great, but, kind of elevated it even more. So looking forward to seeing that.
Well, you're being kind. It used to be mid. It is. They have done an exception.
The SEC, but for college football as a whole,
they've done an exceptional job during the Kiffin era of kind of all of it. They've gone from being an average program to, I think, knocking on the door of elite, and there's been a lot of things that went into that. But yeah, it used to be. I think people used to look at it and go, that's a good one on our schedule. We'll go have a party, and that'll be a dub, and it'll be a sleepy stadium. And for the most part, they were generally right. It's not that way anymore, but it was then. All right, last thing. I know you got a lot of things to do. I'm going to let you go. For people like me, Cubs fans, do we have reason for any optimism going into this season?
I think there's always, I'm an optimist by nature. I am excited about some of the young talent that you could see next year. Obviously, what Pete Crow Armstrong did this year and his growth through, however 140 games that he was in the major leagues was remarkable. And I hope he takes the next step next season. And Shota was a great story. Michael Bush was a great story. All these young players. And so you have to believe that, we talk about the sophomore slump, but I want to believe there's no sophomore slump, and they keep going and trending upward. And then you bring in some of the highly touted prospects. The Cubs have a great minor league system, and you combine that with some of the major league talent, and then we'll see what they do in free agency. But I think there's always hope for optimism, and I know we keep saying this in the NL Central, and obviously the Brewers ran away with the division this past year, but there's a window within the NL Central, especially with what the Cardinals are doing now, saying Nolan Arenado is on the trade block, and we'll kind of see. I think the Brewers most likely will take a step back, but they did surprise a lot of folks this year, so I don't know how much of a step back they'll take. And so you just kind of hope that within the Central, if they could fight and be right there, it would be an entertaining summer. That's my hope.
Yeah, there's nothing like that place when the Cubs are in contention. I was at Game 3 of the World Series in 2016, and it was incredible. It was like, I thought I was a big Cubs fan, and I was around people that had been in that stadium 40 times a year for 40 years. And it was almost kind of spiritual. Does that make sense? It was, it was,
sorry, I didn't interrupt you there.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that's what makes baseball, I think, so special is it's an everyday sport. So you're on in people's living rooms every single day throughout the course of a summer. So it becomes almost a part of who you are as a human being growing up. And that's just a family thing we do. And the amount of stories I have heard after 2016, going and putting flowers on my grandfather's grave to commemorate the Cubs. And it's just so many of those types of stories come out. And that's what, for me, it's like, this is more than just a sport. This is a way of life, and people are entrenched in this. And it's what makes the job so much fun. And it's what makes the place special, because it's not just me and my kids. It's known me and my kids and my great grandpa and his father. Like, that like the family lineage goes on. And I feel really fortunate to play a small role in the organization.
Well, I really appreciate it. Like I told you, I'm a big fan. I think you're phenomenal at what you do. And I thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving, safe trip to Nashville, and a great weekend there as well.
Thank you so much. It was so fun to connect with you. And I look forward to hopefully getting a game in Oxford next year, and we can hang out in the Grove.
Thanks, Taylor. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Ben Mintz from Barstool Sports joins as he does each and every week. We're recording this on Monday because obviously it's Thanksgiving week. Ben will be in Oxford on Friday for the Egg Bowl, Mississippi State, Ole Miss. I'm sure we'll talk about that game in a moment. Ben, happy Thanksgiving to you and your family. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Always love coming on here, and a lot to get breakdown rivalry week. A lot of value on the gambling board. I mean, I'll address the elephant in the room. Obviously, everything's terrible after Saturday for Ole Miss, but can't dwell on it. Yeah, you can. I'm just trying to sugarcoat it, but let's just make some dang money. Let's just make some money. What can I do?
You know what happens? It's sports, man. It's sports, and it happens in sports. You want to get right to the Friday games?
Yeah, if you want. Yeah, we can. We can do that. If you want, we can touch on the Egg Bowl when we get to it. That's fine.
All right. So we'll start on some Friday games. We got some games, I guess, that have some ramifications. Colorado's a 17-point favorite at home against Oklahoma State. Boise State's a 20.5-point home favorite against Oregon State. So, I guess those games, if you had upsets, those games would upset the apple cart a little bit. Yeah,
there's a Thursday night one, Memphis-Tulane. It's Thanksgiving night in NOLA. Tulane's locked up. Tulane, if they get a win here, hosts Army in the AAC Championship next Friday night in NOLA. What John Summerall's doing there. They've outscored. They're just killing everybody. I just wanted to mention a quick thought on the Memphis-Tulane game. Tulane's 14. That's tough. If the weather is okay, over 56.5, I like a lot in that game. Those Memphis games get wild. Tulane should score in the mid to high 30s. And Memphis is, up-tempo with a 4-year starting quarterback. I think they'll score some points. So as long as the weather's okay in NOLA, I'm going to fire that over pretty big on Thursday night.
I did 2 over-unders last week. I'm terrible at them. I did badly. I lost them both. I'm never touching another one. I'm completely done with over-unders. I do well on spreads, and I do terrible on over.
Well, I gave you over 50.5 Lions Colts, and that can't book them all. But I did give you Cleveland and Miami, so I did give you some winners.
You did. You helped me a little. All right.
You mentioned the Friday. I'll quit. Colorado needs to run it up, but still 17's a lot. Boise, I actually like Boise laying 20.5. They're back home. They're a lot different at home. They had a couple sluggish road wins, especially at Wyoming. But I think they just kicked the crap out of Oregon State. They're trying to, get this 4 seed or whatever. I think this is a spot where they might run it up.
All right. As we record this, Ole Miss is a 25.5-point home favorite over Mississippi State Friday afternoon at 2:30. I don't know. I'll tell you my thoughts, and then you go for it. State's terrible on defense. They can stop nothing. But Ole Miss is so weird on offense, especially with their running game, that I don't know that Ole Miss can go do much about it. Don't get me wrong, Ole Miss is going to win the game, and they're going to win the game easily. But I don't know that I trust that number. It's a big number.
Yeah, the number's really. It's weird because there's a spot where if Ole Miss, they should be able to score at will. State allowed 58 points at home to Arkansas, and Missouri 39. They can't stop anybody. But I just have a real hard time laying 25.5 points with what just happened Saturday for Ole Miss. It's just, what's the mindset of the program? And so I don't know if you're going to get a slow.
I'll help you with that part. I think they're going to convince themselves that, hey, look, it's not likely, but we've got to do our part first. Let's go win the game Friday. Let's win it convincingly. I think this is the plan. Let's win it convincingly, and then let's hope for chaos, right? Let's hope for Vanderbilt over Tennessee. Let's hope for Auburn winning the Iron Bowl. Let's hope Purdue beats Indiana. Let's just hope for chaos, and maybe you get enough chaos that you slip in. Nobody's fantasizing about a home playoff game anymore, but I think they are fantasizing about the 11 seed if it could just maybe work out.
Yeah, well, also it's Jackson Dart's senior day. Great Ole Miss career, 3-year starting quarterback. He's going to want to go out a winner here. I just can't. My thing is, look, I never bet against Ole Miss. I can't lay 25.5 with all this stuff going on. Like, yeah, there's a world where they could really run it up in the second half. Also, weather, high 48, but sunny, no rain. So hopefully, because I feel like those Egg Bowls always have crappy weather, but at least this one's at 2:30 and not a night game, so that'll make it a little warmer.
I kind of love Georgia Tech plus 19.5 at Georgia.
So I like it. The only thing on this is we got to see what's going on with Haynes King because he's been hurt the last few weeks. Georgia Tech star quarterback. If he's out, I'm not touching him because their backup sucks. But if he goes, I like him plus 19.5. He tried to go against NC State last week, couldn't. I think he threw 3 passes. He's got a shoulder injury. And as I looked up before the segment what his status was, and I couldn't find anything yet. So that's totally dependent on him going. If he does go, I do like Georgia Tech, and I'll watch that. I've been doing this a little bit this year. Georgia Tech's plus 525 money line first half. I don't know if they can win the game, but Georgia's had a lot of really, really slow starts this year. And I think there's a world where Georgia Tech could be winning at half and Georgia comes back. I know that's kind of specific, but I think that's possible.
Keep in mind, it is Georgia at night. They typically play very well in that stadium at night. Nebraska at Iowa. I know no championship ramifications, but Iowa's kind of played okay the last week or two. Nebraska's kind of weird. This is a rivalry game that Iowa lost a year ago in Lincoln. I'm sure that this is a bit of a revenge spot for them this time around.
I can't believe I'm saying this, a Nebraska-Iowa game, but I like over 39.5. I know that's a wild thing to say, but, Nebraska, they got Dana Holgerson calling plays now, which is a big upgrade at OC. Raiola, the freshman quarterback's back, looked real good. They blew out Wisconsin. And Iowa, man, they got this Caleb Johnson runs for 150 a week. Since they fired Francis' son, their offense has gotten better and their defense has regressed a little bit. And so what you think Iowa football hadn't really been the case. They've been playing overs all year.
Yeah,
so I kind of like over.
Johnson's terrific. He's one of the better backs in the Big Ten. Michigan is at Ohio State. Ohio State looking to close it out as a 21-point home favorite.
This Ohio State game script's been the same all year. They're close games first half, and they blow people out in the second half. I think that may be coming yet again here. I just don't see how Michigan can move the ball. I do think Michigan's defense can keep them in the game in the first half, just because they're good up front, and we saw what they did to Indiana. So I think 21 is probably about right. If I was looking to do anything, if you can get Michigan plus 10.5 or 11 first half, I might look at them to make it a game in the first half.
The Battle of South Carolina's got ramifications this year, potentially. South Carolina's a 2.5-point road dog going to Clemson. Clemson trying to get into the ACC title game. South Carolina trying to get to 9-3. And like Ole Miss, they're hoping for chaos. If there's enough chaos, maybe they slip into the very back of the 12-team tournament.
I like South Carolina here. I think they're telling you a lot with it only being 2.5 and not Clemson by 3. When you look at Clemson this year, man, I know they've beaten a lot of bad teams, but anytime they got wiped out by Georgia, they got blown out at home by Louisville, anytime they've stepped up in competition, it hadn't been very impressive, and they've just beat down the dregs of the ACC. And so I'm not all that convinced that they're that good. And South Carolina, man, that front seven on D is really good. But really just watching Sellers come on at quarterback, he's so hard to get on the ground. You watch him play, he's got that big frame, but, man, he just keeps plays alive, and he's hard to tackle. And so I feel like I actually like South Carolina even on the road.
Another game, assuming Ole Miss beats Mississippi State, they'll be watching this one closely. It's Tennessee at Vanderbilt. The Doors, an 11-point home dog.
Man, I'm at a point where anybody that's a 10-point or higher home dog you got to take. I know I was wrong about Ole Miss Florida last week, but these SEC home dogs, you saw it with Oklahoma against Bama, Florida against Ole Miss. This has been happening all year long. And I'm not saying Vandy wins, but I do think they fight. Tennessee's got a good running game with Sampson, but the passing game's been a little dicey. And I think Vandy can keep this thing close. I don't know if they can win, but they covered at LSU last week, and I feel like they can cover here.
There's a world, believe it or not, where Texas Tech gets into the Big 12 title game. The chaos has to ensue, but they're still alive. They play host to West Virginia as a 3.5-point favorite.
I like Texas Tech here. West Virginia is not. I know they just beat UCF, but that's a long trip to Lubbock, and Lubbock's a weird place to play.
Louisville goes to Kentucky. Kentucky finishing out a miserable season. At least they can do this. If Ole Miss doesn't make the playoff, Kentucky can go, well, we kept them out. That's the one thing they got. That's all they got, but they got that. It was an abomination of a loss for Ole Miss. Louisville's a 3.5-point favorite.
Man, this is one of those weeks, these rivalry games, I always like underdogs because you can kind of throw the record books out. That Kentucky backup quarterback in the second half, I forgot his name, but they benched Vanderdrift. I thought he was throwing the ball a little better in that second half against Texas. I had the under in that game, and I got really, really lucky to hit it. It should have gone over. I kind of got away with one. I think Kentucky's defense will play hard at home in a rivalry game. Give me the plus 3.5.
All right. I'm looking for other games. Notre Dame goes to USC. Another game Ole Miss fans will be watching and cheering for the Trojans here. They'll hope Lane Kiffin's old employer can get him some help by knocking off the Irish. Notre Dame a 7.5-point favorite at the Coliseum.
Man, this Notre Dame team, they're so well coached. Really Al Golden. Their defense is so well coached, and I feel like. I mean, I know I'm a home dog guy, but I don't trust USC here, man. USC's offense hasn't looked very good all year. They're on that. They've got the UNLV transfers in there at quarterback. I kind of think Notre Dame takes care of it. I'm not sure I'm going to bet it, but I think Notre Dame wins this game.
Miami goes to Syracuse, needing a win as a 10.5-point favorite.
I really like Syracuse here. Why? Syracuse, this Miami thing, they can't stop anybody. And those Syracuse games in that dome get real wild. And Kyle McCord's going to chunk it all over Miami. Yep. And the over 67, I don't think that's high enough. I think this game's like 41-38, one way or the other. Also, a thing on Miami, I know I mentioned this first half thing, but I've had a dead read on Miami. They are horrible in the first half every week. And then they have to come back and have these big second halves. And I think Syracuse is like plus 230 money line first half. I think Syracuse jumps them early, and you see Miami try to fight back late in a high scoring game that could go either way. I think Syracuse is real live in this game.
Yeah, this is a candidate for my money line. I need a big money line to hit for me to catch Tyler. This is plus 330. I don't hate it.
No, I don't hate it at all. There's a few of them this week, but Syracuse plus 330, I like it. And another one that's wild, odds thing. So Clemson 6-1 to win the ACC right now. Syracuse beats Miami. Clemson will be favored over SMU, and I think the game would be in Charlotte on a neutral field. So that's worth a look too.
All right. Speaking of SMU, they're at home against Cal as a 13.5-point favorite.
I think SMU takes care of it. Cal came back and beat Stanford in their rivalry game, but SMU's really got it rolling right now. They're at home. They've got a lot. They're playing for a lot. I don't know if I'm only at 13.5, but I don't think they lose this game.
All right, here's another money line that I don't hate. This is going to surprise some people. I don't hate Auburn plus 340 in the Iron Bowl. The Tigers getting 11.5 at Alabama.
If this game was at Auburn, I think Auburn would win with how bad Bama's been on the road this year. But the thing is, man, we say whatever about Hugh Freeze, man. Hugh Freeze fights as an underdog. He's a bad favorite, but we saw it last week. The only thing with Auburn, I think it's going to be a game first half, but every Peyton Thorne just does something so stupid every second half.
Have you looked at Jalen Milroe's numbers?
Yeah.
He's not doing it. We're giving him a lot of hype off a couple of performances early in the season and in an inexplicable defensive performance by LSU. That is the hype. His numbers are not any better than Peyton Thorne's.
Yeah, I know. I think Auburn will fight. I lean the 11.5. I don't know if they can win at Bama, but I do think they'll fight a rivalry game. Like I said, Freeze has a real knack for getting his guys up for games like this. All the Ole Miss fans know it too. He's a tough underdog, and Bama's kind of reeling right now.
Arizona State needs a win. They've been on a roll. They go to Tucson as an 8.5-point favorite.
There's going to be body bags laying on this field of what Arizona State's going to do to Arizona in this game. I'm not a road favorite guy, but they're going to win this thing by like 30 or 40. Arizona stinks. I don't think Tucson's any kind of a home field. Arizona State has had some great first halves the last 2 weeks, even though they let K-State, BYU kind of fight back second half. Love their running game. Love Kenny Dillingham. I think he's one of the best young coaches in the country. I think they're going to just this is going to get just bloody in that game.
Arkansas heads to Missouri. The Razorbacks did the stupid video. You in today's era as an SEC team, you don't celebrate going bowling. You just don't. They go to Missouri. As long as Brady Cook plays, I love the Tigers here -3.5.
Yeah, I'm Missouri or nothing, but I feel like Missouri's got this habit of these close games where I feel like there's a world where Missouri wins by 3 here a ton. Like Arkansas all year, I know they've gotten blown out a couple times late, but they played all those close games early with like A&M, and they kind of would fight every week, and I feel like this is a spot they might fight. Missouri just has such a knack for close games. However, if Cook does go, Arkansas, I don't know if they can cover Luther Burden because Arkansas.
That's the thing. That's the thing. I mean, the only team that's really blown them out is Ole Miss. I mean, LSU pulled away in the fourth quarter, but that was kind of it was competitive. The Texas game was very competitive because I don't think Texas is all that good.
We're gonna. Oh, fear not, we will be addressing that.
I mean, Arkansas's had an okay year. They blew that Oklahoma State game early. That hurt them because they'd have 7 right now. They'd have a chance to get to 8. That game hurts them as much as anything because Oklahoma State turns out wasn't good. And they let that game get away. It was a game that Arkansas dominated and then lost with the goofy stuff. I think they'll look back and regret that because this was a team that probably had a realistic shot at 8 wins, and they didn't do it. They undercoached, which is why I think they should make a certain decision. They're not going to. I'm trying to look here.
I want to address our ULM thing because I have some stuff to say about this ULM.
Oh, okay. All right. I was going to skip it because people get mad at me for
talking about my people boys. Can say whatever they want. I like ULM money line. I've seen this with ULM the last few years. They randomly win these home games as a dog. I think ULL is vulnerable. ULM's playing for a bowl. As bad as it's been, with them losing 5 in a row, this is one I think they can win.
And ULL struggled a little lately.
They're not that good. And then I'm going to make an even wilder call on this.
Hell yeah, let's do it.
South Alabama 13-1 to win the Sun Belt.
Is that what you had going into the year?
No, that's what they are right now. I looked it up before. So if ULL, this is a wild call. It's if ULM beats ULL and South Alabama beats Texas State at home, South Alabama's in the title game against either Marshall or Georgia Southern, who I think they're better than both. So the whole thing on this 13-1 call is thinking ULL could lose. But I can see it. 13-1 is a good price. I think South Alabama just crushed ULL at ULL 2 weeks ago. So it's a wild call, but I think it's possible.
Big game in, what is this, the Conference USA? Jacksonville State's at Western Kentucky. Jacksonville State's a 1.5 point.
Yeah, I don't have much here. Jacksonville State's locked up a title game, spot in the title game. They're going to be at home. It could be if they play Liberty if they beat Sam Houston. And it's if Sam Houston beats Liberty, I think Sam Houston gets. I don't know. It's all convoluted, but I don't know. I don't know CUSA as well.
Purdue goes to Indiana. Indiana just need to win big because they did not look like a tournament team last week. They're a 28.5 point favorite.
They should kill them. A lot of these games though, with it being this time of year, got to check weather reports and stuff because that can slow down offenses. But I think Indiana rolls.
Florida has a chance to finish this thing really strong. They go to Tallahassee as a 15-point favorite.
I like under 45 is what I think it is because I think this could be – I don't think Florida State can score, but I do think similar to like when they played Miami, they played hard on defense and stayed in it for a while, and I think they'll be hyped up to play hard on defense at home against their rivals. So, I mean, I think Florida wins, but I could see it being like 24-10, something like that.
It's the game no one will be watching because of what it's up against, but it's a very interesting game. Oklahoma is at LSU coming off that big win over Bama. The Sooners getting 6 in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, this one I've kind of had a tough time back and forth. I don't think Oklahoma with that offense can win on the road. I know their defense, though, has been very underrated, as we just saw against Zach Alley. That their 31-year-old defensive coordinator was at Jacksonville State last year. He's best young defensive mind in the country, I think. Look out for him in the future. It's just like LSU doesn't blow people out really because they haven't had that extra gear this year. So I'm giving you a long-winded speech, but I think the line's about right. I think I'd lean under 47 if I had to do anything.
Washington's at Oregon. Oregon looking to finish out an undefeated regular season as a 19-point home favorite. I kind of like the Ducks to roll here.
Yeah, I feel like they may make a statement here. I mean, Washington, I don't think Washington has the firepower to keep up.
All right, it's in College Station. Texas A&M coming off of a quadruple overtime loss at Auburn. I hate overtime rules. I'm done. I've vented all week. Texas is a 6-point favorite.
I absolutely love A&M +6. Like, not even like. It's my favorite game of the week. They lost as a 2-point road favorite at Auburn. This Texas team is super vulnerable right now because they don't have a running game. Ewers isn't that mobile, and he's inconsistent. The atmosphere in this game is going to be one of the craziest of all time with them not playing for 13 years. And here's the thing. I mean, what a world A&M lives in. They lose at Auburn, and they go from 17-1 to 8-1 in the SEC because of the Bama loss. I think A&M wins this game, and it's A&M Georgia SEC championship. And I'm also not just +6, +195 money line, pretty big. I mean, okay. A&M's my favorite game of the whole week.
I think it's
even taking it farther, people are going to think I'm crazy, but whatever. I mean, that's fine because everybody always thinks that. A&M's 8-1 SEC. If they match up with Georgia in Atlanta, Marcel Reed's mobility on that turf is an X factor in those dome games. And you saw what Milroe did to Georgia last year. I think A&M would actually have a chance to beat Georgia. And I know that's so crazy to say that A&M, I think, can win the SEC, but I think it's very live, even with them having 3 losses. I'm not saying that great. And this is the craziest thing ever, and people are really going to laugh at me. I don't think they can necessarily win at all. I know they're not great. But I'm going to put in a little flyer on A&M 150-1 national championship this week in case they win the SEC and get the bye. Just to have it. I mean, it's like $50 to win 7,500. Whatever.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, I don't think they can win it, but if they won the SEC, they'd have a bye and they'd be in the court.
They'd have to win. They'd be 3 games away from a title.
But I mean, let's be real here. I'm trying to get this 150-1 where if they somehow snuck in the semis, I'm just hedging. I'm going to hedge out. They can't win it all, but it's just the 150-1.
All right. Some NFL. We get to the Thursday, Thanksgiving Day games, traditional games, where the NFL goes for the throat and they get it. You get Bears, Lions. The Lions, just a juggernaut right now. A 10.5-point favorite over the Bears.
Yeah, this Lions bunch, man. What a fun team to watch. Like, the balance they have on offense, I've never even seen anything like it with that O-line and Evan Montgomery and Gibbs. And then when you have Amon-Ra and Jameson Williams and Laporta and Goff super accurate, the only way to stop them is you got to get heat on Goff. But, like, their offensive line's like the best in football. So, like, who does that? I mean, it's 10.5's a lot in a division game, but there's just no way I'm going against Detroit. They're going to want to run it up on Thanksgiving against Chicago on TV against a rival. So I lean Detroit. Kind of lean over here because Caleb Williams actually did play better last week. Threw for 330 against Minnesota. And this game being indoors on turf, I mean, I was wrong about that Lions-Colts over last week, but I think I like over 48.5 here.
It's a great uniform game. It's a great rivalry game. The 2 teams suck. It's the The Cowboys. The Cowboys giving 4 at home.
Cowboys always beat the Giants, but I mean that's when Dak plays. You got to give Cowboys credit for showing fight and winning as a 10.5-point dog last week when everybody thought they were quitting. This Giants thing is, I mean, they're dead. It's hard to lay 4 with Dallas, but I just think the Giants the veto thing. Back out there for Dallas, so they can rush the passer.
We'll roll through these a little bit. Your Wi-Fi is getting a little spotty on you, and you got stuff to do anyway. Raiders at the Chiefs on Friday in the Amazon game. It's a 13-point line. The Raiders are horrible.
Desmond Ridder starting for the Raiders. Just bet Casey. He wins and never covers, but they will. I'm telling you, Desmond Ridder can't play football in the NFL. Right. I think KC.
Yeah, hey, you're breaking up bad. We'll do it. We'll do it this way. Do you got any NFL hot takes that you got to get out before we?
You want me to just let me see if I can get on my phone. I can make it really quick.
All right, we got Seahawks and Jets in New York. The Jets a 2-point home dog.
Man, this Seattle thing's so weird. You never know what's going to show up week to week. Jets just fired everybody. GM already fired their coach. They may be just playing out the strings. I mean, I guess I'll lean Seattle, but I'll stay away.
Houston's at Jacksonville. The Jags a 5-point home dog.
And this Houston thing, their second half, they're all like the anti of these first halves. They have these great first halves, and they can't score second half. I just next. I don't know.
Minnesota's at Washington. I'm sorry. The Titans at Washington. Titans a 5.5-point dog.
Kind of like Tennessee here. Washington's fallen off. Watching them a little bit. Tennessee, big road win against Houston last week. Levis made some plays. He's pushing the ball down the field. The problem is like every time you think he's getting better, he turns it over. But I kind of lean the plus 5.5 here. I don't like what I'm seeing out of Washington right now. It feels like they're fading.
I catch myself cheering for Levis sometimes because everybody hates on him. And I'm like, it seems like people just hate him for the fun of hating him, and I don't like that. Arizona is at Minnesota. This is a good game. The Cardinals a 3.5-point road dog.
Like over 45.5 here. Minnesota's pass defense just allowed 330 to Caleb. I think Kyler's going to sling it on them, and I think this is just indoor game. This one's going to get a little wilder. I also think this total is lower because Arizona just played that crappy 13-6 game in the rain against Seattle, and so I think it's a good spot to take over.
I have a rule. I take the Steelers whenever they're a underdog, period, the end. If they're a favorite, I either stay away or bet the other team. But if they're a road dog, I take them. And they're a road dog at Cincy. It's a 3-point line.
Yeah, I lean Pittsburgh plus 3 here because of what you said. I actually kind of like over 48 because the Bengals are scoring on everybody this year, but their defense can't stop anybody. And I know it's weird to like an over in a Pittsburgh game, but I think these Bengals games are getting wild. Burrow's having the best season of his career, and they just can't win. They score high 30s every week.
It's such a waste. It's really embarrassing what's happened with them. All right, the Colts. Speaking of embarrassing, Richardson's bad. The Patriots are bad. Richardson and the Colts are 3-point road favorite in New England.
I like under 42 here. I just think the Patriots have a really bad pass D, but they are good against the run, and I just think this is going to be an ugly game.
Chargers go to Atlanta as a 1.5-point favorite.
I really like Atlanta in this game. We're taping Monday, so the Ravens play the Chargers tonight, but Atlanta's off a bye. Chargers got a Monday night game against Baltimore and then a cross-country noon trip on a short week against the team rested for 2 weeks. I think this is a game Atlanta wins with that situation.
Tampa Bay goes to Charlotte to play the Panthers. The Panthers a 6-point home dog.
Man, I can't, is Bryce Young improved? What's going on here? I thought he played great against KC last week. Man, I don't know. It's hard to take Carolina. I had them last week against KC, but I don't think I have a strong. Maybe the over here. Maybe.
Rams in New Orleans to face your Saints. The Rams a 3-point favorite.
Yeah, it's Rams by 3, 48.5. I was telling Neal this off the air. I won a $25,000 free touchdown bet through a Barstool Survivor TD thing, and I'm strongly leaning to putting the $25K on Taysom Hill to score a touchdown in this game, and that's really what I've got. I don't know what to think about the line or the game, but I know that whatever I can think about Taysom Hill finding the end zone, if I have a $25K bet on it, that's where my energy is.
Probably the game of the week, Eagles, Ravens. Everybody's real high on the Ravens. I'm not as much. Baltimore 2.5-point favorite over Philly.
It's hard to analyze this without knowing what happens in Baltimore Chargers tonight, where Baltimore's a 2.5-point favorite. But man, I don't think you can go against Philly right now with what I'm seeing out of them. That team, I'm obviously Saquon's big MVP candidate now, but man, they've got it just rolling. And Baltimore's pass defense, AJ Brown's in a groove and healthy again, and I think he might feast in this game. So, I think I'd lean Philly if anybody.
Sunday night game, the Niners coming off just an awful outing in Green Bay. Now they got Buffalo. It doesn't get any easier. The Bills a 6.5-point favorite.
Bills looking to clinch the AFC East. Man, this Niners thing, we've talked about it a lot. No Trent Williams. Purdy's trying to come back this week. McCaffrey's not. If you've watched him, he's not what he was at all. You can tell he's slow. I think Buffalo may wax him here. I think the Niners thing, they've just had injuries all year. It just feels like it's a snake bit year.
We're expecting a team that used to be good just because they used to be good, and that's not how it works. All right, then the Monday night game is Cleveland at Denver. The Broncos continue to sort of impress. The Browns coming off a emotional win over Pittsburgh. They go to Denver as a 5.5-point dog.
Love Denver here. Denver's done such a good job beating bad teams. Sean Payton. Bo Nix is playing great football. I think this is a spot to go against Cleveland. I like Denver here.
Ben, what's your favorite Thanksgiving dish?
Ooh, I'm a big cream spinach guy. I know that's kind of a weak cop out answer. I like sweet potatoes. I mean, I like the turkey dressing cranberry combo. Like when you have the whole combo, really good too. I'm not the biggest pumpkin pie or sweet potato pie guy, but definitely enjoy some Thanksgiving. I'm going to Doe's in Greenville on Wednesday night, so I'm gonna be honest. I'm more fired up about that steak than I am the turkey.
Yeah, no, I understand. I've said this many times. This is an overrated meal. If it were such a good meal, we'd have it more than once a year. I mean, it's just the thing. I get why we do it. I'm all for traditions. I like it. People go, "Oh, you hate Thanksgiving." I'm like, nope, that's not what I said. I'm just saying the meal's kind of generally sort of overrated. It's fine. It's good. I love dressing, but like after a while, you're like, if I loved it that much, I'd have it more than once a year. I'd have it at least like 3 or 4 times, right?
Yeah, I think the best thing about Thanksgiving, other than getting to be with your loved ones and family, is that I don't know who decided it was a Thursday holiday, but that's the best thing about it because you get it all, you get the Thursday through Sunday.
Yeah.
Instead of like the revolving days, the fact that it's always a short week and you get the whole thing. I think that's the best tradition with it.
And you kick it off on Wednesday because everybody has to travel to be there on Thursday. So you do something like we're doing smash burgers Wednesday night. I mean, smash burgers. Yeah. Everybody loves smash burgers, right? I mean,
oh yeah,
that's what I mean. So it's kind of the whole, no. Thanksgiving has a great purpose. It's a kickoff to a 4-day weekend that kicks you into the Christmas season, and then the Christmas season nobody really works, so it's kind of awesome.
Yeah, I agree. And then I've got my weekend set up pretty well where I'm going to be in the Delta with family, and I'm doing that Doe's Wednesday night, and I'm coming to Oxford Black Friday morning, and I'm hanging out and just watching football all day Saturday, popping around the square in Oxford. And then I fly back to Chicago Sunday morning. So, I'm looking forward to it's nice to not really have a planned Saturday to just get to kick it in Oxford. So,
well, if I don't see you on Friday, maybe I'll see you somewhere around the square or something.
Yeah, I'm just going to be hanging out watching football. I'm telling y'all, I'm betting a lot of money. This A&M +6 situation, real thing. I'm going to be real heavy on the Aggies Saturday night.
Ben, happy Thanksgiving, man. Safe travels. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me, Neal. And, hotty toddy, let's get a win, even though enthusiasm. It's been hard.
Again, our thanks to all of our guests on the show today. Appreciate all of their time here on a holiday week. Very kind of all of them to give some time as we get ready for the Egg Bowl, the rest of the college football weekend, and Week 13 in the NFL. So again, our thanks to Ryan Brown of The Next Round, Brett Norsworthy of the Ole Miss Radio Network, WHBQ in Memphis, to Taylor McGregor of Marquee, covering the Chicago Cubs, and also ESPN, and then Ben Mintz, kind enough to join each and every week right here on MPW Digital Extra on behalf of Barstool Sports. So happy Thanksgiving to everyone. We'll have coverage throughout the week. We'll have a post-game show presented by Realtree after Friday's game as well. So until then, again, happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays, and talk to you again soon.